Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm here with Ash. Hi Ash.
What is going on? I love being here.
Thanks for coming back and joining me. I am terrible at scheduling these things, and I'm glad you reached out and we got it going, and we're here.
Well, I am glad you had me on because I'm looking forward to talking about comics and geek culture and having some drinks and having fun with people in the chat. So let's go.
Absolutely. Like always, please throw your questions in. We'll kind of answer as we go, and we're just here to kind of chat and hang out. It's the night before Halloween, and I don't know. It's everybody's already in masks, so
Is this Halloween? All Hallows Eve?
All Hallows Eve. Well, no, wait. You know what? I've started drinking already, so I'm not sure. I think it's just All Hallows Eve.
Well, Halloween is All Hallows Eve.
Okay. I do not have any idea then.
Once upon a time when I was young, I dabbled around in the occult.
Okay.
November 1st is the day at midnight. That's the whole thing about Halloween. It's like at midnight. That's the big actual holiday. So as the clock turns and goes into November 1st, that's the dark, unholy hour. And that's where it comes from.
It all is a build up to Thanksgiving where you have a huge fight with your family.
Oh yeah. Or get arrested by the police maybe this year.
Yeah, that could happen. Both, either or. Yeah. It's I mean, certainly a strange time. This is a strange year.
2020.
I'm glad everybody's here. Thanks for coming to the chat. We'll see how things are going. I've been messing around with YouTube, so I have no idea if you're getting notifications for things or what's going on. Maybe if you saw the last video, I'm changing different formats and lots of different things going on. So I don't know what I'm doing, clearly, is the answer. But okay, so you're healthy, you're well, and you've been reading some comics.
I am. Yes.
Good.
Okay. I don't know if that was at me or not.
No, at you for sure. Hey,
yeah.
We'll get to some stuff. I want to talk about what we're drinking here real quick, but I'm curious what you think of this. So, do you think Ten of Swords is going to be an event we'll remember in 2 years? I think in 2 years, yes. I think in 5 years it gets pretty dodgy. What are you following Ten of Swords at all, by the way?
Absolutely. I thought about trying to dip my toes in just out of the morbid curiosity because you may know or not know, I'm not sure, but I dipped out on Dawn of X about 6 issues in. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I am absolutely the opposite of a fan. And I want to follow it because I like comics. I like people that are following it. I like being part of the conversation. But nothing that I've seen as in any way, shape, or form said, "Oh, you're missing out on this, Ash. You should." I'm like, oh, God, I think it was you did you post the Wolverine Storm thing on Twitter?
Oh yeah, they're teasing that pretty heavily right now.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh God.
Yeah,
I did that eye roll. I was like, I just not even care. I don't care. I don't care.
You know, the people who are in. I think it definitely has. The one interesting thing about it is that the X-Men fan base, I think, has gotten a little bit more, I don't say rabid, but committed. They're definitely, it has its fans. But I'm noticing a lot of people, kind of similar with your story, they tried it a little bit. They got kind of, a bit of a taste with the House of X, Powers of 10. They maybe wanted to do more. And then kind of they, for whatever reason, didn't catch them right away. And I do think it had kind of a slow, in some cases, some stumbly start, depending on the titles. But now, if you look at it, and it's like, come back. You're talking like 13, 14 issues a month. Like, that's got to be daunting. I mean, even like, where do you even begin?
Even if it was pretty good to me, even if I was like, this is okay. This is kind of how I feel about the Batman titles. Batman being a book that I do collect. I'm like, it's pretty okay. It's fun. I'm enjoying it. I wouldn't want 13 Batman books a month though. I'm like, a 2 is barely like, I think like 4 a month I have to buy because they're double shipping.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's fatiguing. Like that's the big issue. Like you'd have to put out absolute greatness for me to want to dive into 13 issues a month.
I have to believe that it's going to be, I think there are people who would kind of like to get into it. They've heard the buzz, and it's just it feels overwhelming to come in with that volume every month. And I don't think. Do you believe the publishers always say this? You don't have to buy all the issues, and it's true. You don't. I mean, even with Ten of Swords, as we've seen, the whole first half has been collecting the swords. And so if you missed one of those issues, you're going to be okay. But at the same time, like with Batman, don't you feel kind of like if you do just read what you want, they're going to kind of toy with you a little bit. They're going to introduce things. You're going to miss something.
Yeah, I think the whole you don't got to buy every issue is one of the biggest cop out things from a publisher that it's such a mean nothing statement. I don't
Yeah.
even have to buy, like, let's say I'm an X-Men fan. I could just buy every third issue. I don't have to buy even every issue of X-Men.
True.
I could just buy once in a blue moon. I could on my birthday, that birthday month, I buy an X-Men.
Yeah.
I could do whatever I want. I'm the buyer. So the idea of like you just don't have to, but if I want to immerse myself in the story, right? When I go to a movie, I don't have to watch the whole movie. I can go out in the middle of it and go buy some popcorn, go use the restroom, make a phone call, come back in. I can choose to consume it that way if I want, but obviously the idea is to create a product that people don't want to miss.
Well, exactly. I mean, they want you to buy all these, even if, I mean, it'd be kind of like if, well, I mean, it's a bad example because it's an all-you-can-eat streaming service, but it'd be like if Netflix was like, hey, we got Cobra Kai, but you don't have to watch season 2. You can just not watch it, and I mean, that's true. But like that doesn't make any sense. Like you want people to consume everything you put out. I don't know.
For sure.
Well,
and especially on this event, which part of me, credit where credit's due. They're numbering every X of Swords book as like the next part. So it's like, here's part 13, here's 14. Like, so obviously they're expecting you to not go from part 12 to part 15.
That's true. So I on one hand, I do appreciate that they're providing a very clear, here's where you want to go next. But on the other hand, it is exactly what you say. They're clearly ordering it for you. I mean, they want you to buy everything. I don't know. It's not a bad event. I will say it's slow. It's decompressed as hell. Some issues I've liked, some issues I haven't liked. It's kind of, I was on Wes's show. I think I said it was a C, which maybe is a too tough a grade, but it has some good elements to it. But there are parts that are really drug out. It feels like they're just padding it heavily at this point.
I think ultimately what matters is for the fans who are buying the book, are they happy?
Yeah.
I'm not buying it because they lost my interest, and maybe I'm missing something, maybe, but I'm not losing out. I'm not, because I haven't spent any money. But for the people who are out there spending the money, from what I'm observing, at least on social media and stuff, most people seem at least pleased. They're like, it's a positive.
Yeah.
What's going on? So that's okay, cool. Like no one's like out there screaming, going, what the hell kind of dog, is this? And so
it's no Iron Man 2020. That's
right. Sure. There we go. Good example. It's no Iron Man 2020.
I think, to kind of conclude this question, I think that if the next part, the second half with the actual sword fighting and that tournament bit, if they do that well, then I think this is going to be remembered for a long time. I think they've had so much build up to the action. It's kind of make or break. If they deliver on that action, I think it's really going to be remembered. If not, I think it's going to be forgotten very quickly. So I think the second half is going to sell it or not.
Perhaps. I think the big struggle that not just X-Men, I mean, just modern mainstream comics have in general is getting people to care.
It's true.
That's very true. And I mean, going back to Batman, they killed Alfred.
Oh yeah.
And people were upset at the audacity of it, but no one cared about the event. That book has fallen down the memory hole. It's just like whatever.
Yeah.
No one's like, oh my God, do you remember that day when they killed Alfred? That was epic. Like when they killed Superman back in the day. Like everyone remembers that. That was part of that day.
Well,
30 years later, we're like, I remember then. I remember where I was.
It's totally true. I one of the more popular videos I think I did is myself and Joe Corallo did a retrospective on Death of Superman. And it's that was such a big event. You had news coverage, you had it was big. And then several years later, you had the death of Captain America, and that video should be out probably in a day or two. It's a long window. It's like almost 2 hours. So you're getting a lot out of that one. But, again, there's news coverage. There was, a lot of people, collectors lining up and everything else. Alfred is certainly not, at the same level as Superman or Captain America, but still that character has been around for decades and decades. And you would think that would have been a bigger kind of event, but it kind of just zipped right by. And I mean, the non-Batman wedding got more attention than that.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great thing that you pointed out, because that's one of the contributing factors in my mind. It's an example of a contributing factor
Mm-hmm.
of why fans are caring less and less. Because first of all, they're getting duped a lot of times. Like, hey, we're gonna do, and it's like, it was all a gimmick, good psych, clickbait. And the other thing is, it doesn't matter. And bringing it back to X-Men, part of the reason I dipped out, among many reasons, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole unless you decide to, but I'm like, it just, nothing matters. People die. I mean, when I dropped X-Force, it was like, oh, look, they shot Professor X, but it immediately doesn't matter. You have this big cliffhanger ending, like Professor X dead, and you see the mask on the ground and it's bullet hole. And in any other case, you'd be like, oh, and this time you're like, he's gonna be resurrected. Like, you just don't care. It's whatever, nothing matters. Just like, and so I'm not invested. I have no emotion. I'm just,
it's a problem. I think it's, man, we went right in. You asked a great question there. We went right into a deep topic, but you're absolutely right. I think and the problem is, we've got to have people care and get invested in order to commit with high prices and the struggle to get comics in general and just grow that audience. You do have to have people who want to buy in. I mean, it's, and they can buy in different ways. You can also buy in just being really entertained. But if it doesn't matter, if everything's quickly rearranged, I think it's much harder to maintain that level of entertainment. I think that's almost a bar that's unreachable, right? I think the MCU ran into this problem when they launched Iron Man. People were like, they're doing an Iron Man movie? Yeah. Oh, hey, this trailer looks pretty amazing. I think I'll go see that. And then they saw the movie, like, oh my God, this movie was really amazing. And then they teased like other films. And so they got on that train and it was all exciting. But the problem is, once you've set that expectation of like how great your experience can be, it's natural human reaction to be like, well, you got to give me more. Like, I've had this before. I now wow me above and beyond this. And it just, that's super hard to do. But one of the things that's not super hard to do, I mean, it does take some effort and stuff, but just make the stuff matter. Make the things that happen in your book, even if it's not the most crazy, exciting, balls to the wall action event of all time, what did happen matters. Now you're like, oh geez, how is this going to ripple across the Marvel universe? You know, that this one little thing happened and it changed this character, and now there, and when you are a person who gets into comic books and you're not just reading a book, say, because you love Spider-Man and that's all you care, you just want to read Spider-Man. You're a person who's like, I love the Marvel universe. One of the appeals that I think comics can deliver that really no other medium can effectively do, not near as well at least, is putting you in this immersive sort of a virtual world where I can be like, ooh, over in this corner, Spider-Man's doing his thing. And then I open up this book and the X-Men are off doing this thing. But psychologically and, and subconsciously in the back of my mind, I know that these guys are all in the same world. Their events and what they're doing, they're not in separate book. Like, it's not like I'm reading a Stephen King book and then a Dean Koontz book. And it's like, no, that these don't relate, whatever. They're just individual stories, one and done. This is all part of the same thing. And what's happening in this world matters. And like, I got to find out, now I want to see what's happening over in the corner of Iron Man. What's he doing in this? Like, and it's addicting. It is.
And comics used to do that really well. And they've sort of just tossed that aside and be like, I don't think people really care about that stuff. And maybe it's too much effort to really even worry about that. Let's just tell stories. And if they conflict, who cares?
Man, okay, so we should just, at a different time I'll have you on, we should just do a video on this topic, because I love, I just love it.
I love talking about that.
It is true. I think there's a problem. There's some great questions in the chat, so let's get to those. But real quick before we do, so what are you drinking tonight, Ash? What do you got?
I have got a selection of drinks. First, first I got a low ball glass with a big, I don't know what you call this thing, an ice ball, just some bourbon.
Nice.
Then I whip myself up that I'm going to take a little bit longer time with. I made a Moscow Mule.
Excellent.
And then I have a bottle of red wine that I picked up the other day that I still haven't finished, that I can turn to if I still need more drinks.
Okay.
And it's comic theme. It's Walking Dead wine.
Okay. Excellent. Now, All right, so you're gonna mix it up tonight.
Maybe the wine doesn't have to be drunk. It's just sitting over there on the other side. And I'm like, but if I feel like I need a drink, I can pour a glass. But I got 2 drinks otherwise.
Okay, well done. I mean, I think you can go with the whiskey to the Moscow Mule.
Certainly, yeah.
Flipping then over to the wine is that's you're taking a little bit of a chance. So,
well, I don't I don't drink wine to get inebriated. That's my
right.
Rule number 1. But just something to sip on while I'm enjoying the conversation, and because I have that hand to mouth addiction thing, a lot of people have. So I'm sitting here like, I just want to sip on something, do something I don't have. Yeah, so that's what that'll be there for.
Excellent. I mean, at some point, it will never happen because it's not feasible. But it'd be wonderful. I'm hoping that we can all meet in some bar somewhere, have some drinks, talk comics, have a good time. That'd be a great night.
If Comic-Con ever comes back,
yes,
I mean that's a great. I know a lot of people come to Comic-Con. I live in San Diego, so hopefully maybe in a couple years the lockdowns will end and we'll be able to sit and have drinks and joke about it and say what a crazy couple of years that was.
2022, 2023. We'll come back. I'll pick up yourself and Rags and or Brian, and yeah, it'll be great. We'll do that.
Sweet. All
right. We'll find it. I'm gonna someday when this is all back in order again, I'll take a trip and go to all the major Comic Cons and see how many of you guys I can meet up with, which is great. But I'm just having a straight whiskey sour. Now you've had a whiskey sour before, right, Ash?
Oh yeah.
Now, are you egg white is gross or egg white's good kind of guy?
I'm either or. I'm definitely not gross. So you want to do it? I'm like thumbs up. If you don't want it, I'm like, all right, it's fine too.
I've come to. I'm not a big egg person, but I've definitely come to respect the egg white as really putting this drink together. So I'm a big fan of that. But real quick, so a couple comments. So first, a challenge to me: each choose a future state mini to read and do reviews. Yeah, I think I will. I probably will cover the minis, the back end of the stories. I think that's a great idea. And Ash, you should join me on this. We can go through some of that stuff.
Oh, sure, yeah. I got lots of opinions on future state.
Yeah, well, I know you do. Well, okay. So the too long didn't read version. Are you excited for future state, or are you not excited for future state?
Oh, I think I'm even less excited than I am for X of Swords.
Okay.
I think it's one of the most unexciting things DC might have ever done. I'm flabbergasted. When they said that they were canceling 5G, or at least paring it back to next to nothing and just having a couple things on Black Label, because I get some of these projects were already in the completion stage. You're not just going to toss them in the bin. So you can retweak them, get some money back. Fine. When they said that, I was like, cool, DC. You like listen to your fans. You put your ear to the pavement. You're like, And then this happened. And I was like, oh, this was just all a ruse. It was just all a PR statement to be like 5G's gone. And let's hope they don't notice that future state is 5G. Mm-hmm. That'll fool them.
I still believe, I mean, if it is in effect their convergence, their 2020 convergence. They're patching time between December and March. I mean, this is basically a fill the time void for them. And
certainly, but you could fill the time with fill-in issues.
Sure.
I would rather have 2. Hey, Joe Schmo, you want to write 2 issues of Batman with a fill-in art at like we need this gap. I would not be happy with that, but I understand the business to the extent of like that has to happen sometimes. But this whole line wide, we're just putting the whole DC Comics on hold while we do this event that a vast majority of the people, at least that I observe, are just not interested at all. To me, I'm telling you, man, Perch, I am struggling to think, why do I keep buying DC Comics going forward?
Ouch.
Because I don't know what's coming in March. To me, this is like a jumping off point. You've given me the easiest way of, it's like, if you're a drug addict or something, right? It's like, well, I'm going to put you in a place for 2 months where you can't have the drugs. Okay, you just help that person inadvertently break the habit, right?
Yeah.
I'm already kind of like, you broke your promise in 2020. You said you were going to drop all your bi-weekly titles, and you said, we're just kidding. We're going to keep them bi-weekly. That's a strain on my wallet that I'm annoyed with. But, hey, as long as the books are good, all right, I'll grin and bear it. But now it's like, oh, now we're going to do this thing that you don't like. And oh, by the way, we're also canceling half the books you collect, period. Like they're just gone. And I'm just like, so I have to hope that in March it's going to be all better. But the problem is, you're showing me that this future state is what you would do as a company. Yeah. And so it puts no faith in me that what I'm going to get in March is like the opposite of future state. Like, oh yeah, we know that's trash. That's not what we actually want to do with comics, even though that's what we're doing. In March, it's going to be all different. No, you're basically telling me this is what DC Comics envisions. This is what the kind of comics we want to do. And I go, I look, the thing is, it's not like all comics are bad.
No,
like, it's not like I have slim pickings and going, man, I really want to buy comics, and I guess this is what I'm going to do. No, there's a bunch of books out there that I'm like, ooh, I kind of want to get that. Like Last Ronin, I didn't get it, and I'm a big TMNT Eastman and Laird fan, but I was like, I can't squeeze a $9 book into my thing. I have to be disciplined, and the fact that it was underprinted made it kind of easier too to be like, I can't get a copy. But it's not because I don't want the book. I'm gonna be like, well, I'll pick it up and trade if it's as awesome as I'm hoping it'll be. I'll just do that. So DC's making it easier to be like, hey, go buy those other books that you wish you were getting. That's what's happening.
And I think that's true. I think that we do have a problem with that. And you made the comment here, and Horizon Brave here around a lot of stores radically underbought Last Ronin. Man, I got some guy just showed up beside the mow wrap right out here. That's great. I'm sorry, everybody, for this guy who just decided he's going to go nuts right outside my window. That's great. At any rate, I think that, so Last Ronin dramatically undershipped. It was actually less the store. It's that the stores didn't even get close to the copies that they were promised or had ordered. I mean, they dramatically underprinted this thing. They didn't even come close to understanding the demand.
Not even 50% of final order cutoff,
which is nuts, right? I mean, and especially for IDW, a company that is on the ropes. I mean, you can look at IDW over the last, I don't know, like 2 years, and really the summary of that company is, what the fuck are you doing? Like, forget the comics and whether they're good or bad, just the logistics of that company. A revolving door of management. People are brought in. They lost their president this week. They lost their head of, I think, digital and kind of new media this week. They had probably their biggest hit in, I don't know, 5 years. I think Last Ronin was going to be their biggest interest book, and they couldn't even deliver 50% of the copies to stores. I mean, what the hell? I don't know. I can't even wrap my head around it.
Apparently, the landscapers are trying to thwart your ability to talk about Last Ronin conspiracy.
It absolutely is. I don't know.
You did a really good video on this.
A while ago, right?
Yeah, about just the IDW whole thing.
Yeah,
I seem to remember. I watched so many videos that sometimes I get mixed up between. Was it Wes that did it, or was it Perch? Anyways. May have been you on Wes's show, but the thing that hit me is, how does IDW decide we're going to print these books and then we're going to do final order cutoff?
Yeah.
Like, reverse order. The whole point of final order cutoff is like, hey, we're about to go to print. We need to know what the final number is. Get your number in by this time or you miss out. No, it's like, we'll order 60,000, then submit the final order cutoff. I was like, ooh, we got over double that. Ooh, now what do we do? Well, you probably fire the guy that you already fired. Remember the guy you already fired because he sucked at his job, and then you hired him back and gave him a promotion? Like, maybe you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, fire the guy 3 or 4 times. I mean, for this. I mean, it's just, IDW is absolutely on the ropes as a company, and regardless of if you like or dislike their content, this is not acceptable for a company that is this on the edge, in trouble with their investors, trying to make progress and everything else, to take their biggest title to undership it to shops, to piss off their fans. And it absolutely insane. I mean, if you're the investors into this company who are down millions of dollars at this point, you got to be killing people. I mean, this company, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's tough for me as a pure fan to even buy any IDW books, precisely because of how poorly they run their company. And I'm like, I don't want to set myself up for disappointment, because the creators are doing good work. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Like, hey, we're working our butts off. We're trying to make a good comic that fans can enjoy. But the publishing house that we're under just completely stomps on us, whether purposely or accidentally, I don't know, every time. And I'm like, so then the books, maybe they get canceled, they don't get ordered. I have a problem with Usagi Ojimbo, which is the only IDW book I get.
That's a good book. Yeah,
it's a great book, but they're constantly damaged. I'm constantly at my store, get in my pull box, and I come, new comic. Hey guys, how's it going on? Here's books, and like, oh hey, and I give it back to them. Say, do you guys have any better copies of this? And my store's real good. They go through their shipments and stuff, and will find me. But it's like every time the spine is rolled, it's got dents where the staples are and stuff, and I'm just like, what is going on over there?
Yeah, I don't know how in this day and age. And one of the problems I have with the comic industry in general is that it hires too many people from within. Like there's a very small pool of people that kind of hop from company to company, and I think that causes a lot of other problems. But you would expect that the one thing it would solve is not to make kind of brand new newbie mistakes, like radically undershipping, mistaking how much you're going to send to print, shipping things in any kind of reasonable order. You'd expect at least those things are taken care of by people who've been doing this for 25 plus years. But here we are. So I don't know. Makes me mad.
Right.
Here's a question. Let me. What do I have here next? Oh, hey, real quick. I don't know if you saw this. Pardon me. There's a weird little kind of commission going on. This art collector. I'm not even going to try and butcher that name. Is basically getting a bunch of name artists to recreate Dark Knight Returns.
Oh.
And kind of page by page. So Ryan Otley is doing stuff, Ryan Sook, Michael Allred, Jock, and there's apparently a bunch more that we haven't heard yet. But you kind of see those pages on the screen. It's some cool stuff there. It's nuts. I don't know. I guess if you got some money and you want to redo these comic books, this is one way you do it. But what do you think? Would you, let's say you had $1 million spent on comics, what would you do this, and what comic would you get recreated?
If I had $1 million to blow on comics, I don't know if I would do this.
Yeah,
but I don't hate this. Like, I think it's neat that there's some crazy rich guy out there who's like, I'm glad that I can potentially enjoy this. I'd almost rather use that money and commission my favorite creators to do stuff that I want that would never get made otherwise. Like, do this personal comic for me.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is kind of neat. The only thing that looks a little like dismaying for me is it almost looks like they're just copying the exact Frank Miller layouts. Yeah. And at which point I'm like, the whole point for me of like comic art isn't just like how well you illustrate, but how do you lay out a page? How do you sequential, like what's your sequential storytelling skills? I would much rather, if I were going to recreate a comic book, which I think is a cool idea. I liked that Detective Comics did this. What was it, 100 issues ago in the New 52, when they did the special 27th issue and they redid Detective Comics 27.
Right.
But it was like, take that script and redo it today, modernize it. Like that was neat to me. I would like to see something like that where it's like, here's the original, which may be difficult for Dark Knight Returns because I don't know if Frank Miller actually worked off a hard script because he wrote and drew it. But take an existing script and forget what the final product is today. Take this script and you draw it based on the script that exists. And how would you do it? Mm-hmm. Because that's where you're truly going to get an artist's vision, I don't want to just see like, oh, he's just do the same exact poses, that's not your vision. You wouldn't have done it that way. And I
Yep.
think you're going to lose a lot of whatever that artist would bring to the table.
Yeah, so you know what, I agree. I would not have thought of this myself, but I do like this idea. I think it's cool. I love that we all get to see the art. I think that's rad. That it's something new for us. But I agree that when I saw this, I'm like, this is very cool. Why are they just recreating the same panels? Like they're just creating the exact same story. And I would have rather seen, like you said, a lot more creativity and not creativity, just, and I'm sure they were told to do this way. So I don't think it's the artists who are.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm sure that was told to do it this way.
But I would love to see them
way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I would just love to see them do a completely different take. Like how sequentially would they have laid out the story? But I think this is a cool little idea. And I don't know if many of you knew this was going on, but yeah, it's some great stuff. So
I would really like to see this. I would really like to see, if I had $1 million or more, or whatever, to blow on weird eccentric ideas like this, I would like to do some books that maybe were like brilliantly written things that maybe they didn't get some of the best art for.
Yeah.
Like we couldn't afford a good artist on this or whatever. And like, hey, let's pay like Alex Ross to like do fully painted art for this thing, or whatever your dream thing is. Like this, I mean, I just pulled a name out of thin air,
I'm with you. I mean, I would grab Alex. I'm too much of a troll or a dick. So I would grab like Alex Ross and I'm like, all right, we're going to do Trouble. So let's recreate that 5-issue series with Aunt May getting it on. That's what I would do. Or I would let's take Art Adams and redo DC Decisions and try that.
So you would take the opposite. You're like, controversial books and like, let's put the greatest artists of all time and redo this thing.
Okay, Carlin, you're coming over here and you're going to do this Spider-Man story where Norman Osborn's sleeping with Gwen Stacy. That's what we're doing. Let's go. And I mean, nobody really wants that, but it would be funny.
I would have commissioned Art Adams to draw America by Gabby Rivera.
Great idea. Yes. Let's have Art Adams do Gabby Rivera's America Chavez. Perfect.
I like what you're thinking.
Comments. So this one is an interesting one because there's a little bit of a conversation here. Do we think there's an intention to make the more big epic events that intentionally have no long-lasting effects? So making them so that they're, in effect here, quick fixes, not long-lasting stories, no big long-term thing. Do you think that's a strategy they're doing, or do you think that's kind of just the result they have?
Absolutely, 100% yes, I think that's a strategy they're doing. There is a marketing ploy that exists all around you. You see it all the time. You may not be aware of it, but it's basically, I don't know what the term is for it. There is a term for it, but it's basically constantly bring something new to the table. So that people feel like, I got to try this new thing. And one of the biggest participants of this is Pepsi Cola company. They do this with a lot of their drink. Every year, or more, maybe every couple of months, there's a new Mountain Dew flavor you got to try. There's new Doritos does this all the time too. Taco Bell, a lot of the fast food chains, especially the ones that own, I forget the company that owns Taco Bell, but BT is Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC. Whatever the guys that own that chain, it's all one company, constantly like, ooh, the new this, and every month it's like something new, and then it's constantly whatever things are going off the menu because the existing product doesn't have enough long-term hold. You're okay with it. You're just like, whatever. I'm hungry. I'm gonna grab some soft tacos at Taco Bell. It's not because most people aren't like, oh my god, they're the best tacos ever. But when it's like, oh, the new Doritos tacos at Taco Bell. Oh my God. I mean, and I'm guilty. I saw that. I was like, you made tacos with Doritos, like a Dorito taco shell? That's genius. I have to try this. And then it was like, now try the new flaming hot Doritos taco. Gotta try that one. It's the same thing with, I think, Marvel Comics, DC, all the big guys have realized they've jumped on that same paradigm of, we know that our audience got short attention spans.
Yep.
And where it takes a lot of work to do like old school comics and big continuity and getting your fans invested and doing like it's much easier to be like, let's just come up with a big new idea every few months and hook the readers and just hype it up on social media. And and it's, if you watch what Marvel's doing, every event is something almost like radically different. It's like you went from the whole big Norse Asgard myth thing, and then immediately you're like, oh, now it's plant people in space, and blah, blah, blah. You're like, okay. And then as soon as it's actually, even before it's over in most cases, they're moving on to the next thing. As it's winding down, they're already getting you excited about, oh, remember that King in Black guy? He's coming. Oh, he's coming. And I will bet you dollars and donuts, before King in Black is over, Marvel is already pointing you at whatever their next thing is, because they don't want you. They know you're going to lose interest, but they want to bait you on the next thing before you do.
Yeah, I mean, constant hype. It's a model, and I don't think it's necessarily a sleazy one. It's just like you're describing it. It's just a business model that they're doing.
Right.
And I think it's you buy in, you're not. And if you love the ride, great. And this comment here at the end is it's an interesting one. If what we just said was true, then why do fans get upset when a character acts the way they want? Because, wait a year and it will just be corrected in the next writer's run. They're doing it completely different. Why get bent out of shape at all? And I think there's some truth to this. I think in general, people should try not to get completely bent out of shape, for their own well-being and sanity. I think that's a good idea. But, the counterpart to this is, and this is a weird one, is I think most comic fans want to be invested. They want to be attached to it. They have high expectations for what they're going to read. They really want it to matter. Like they're kind of clinging to this, bigger idea. They want to care.
Yes, I think so. And I think that's why that marketing strategy works.
Yeah.
Because people are constantly looking for that next thing that they're going to love. And hype, the whole idea of hype is that your mind makes you think you're going to love it more than you actually will.
Right.
But that anticipation of like, this is going to be the greatest thing ever is it fuels those endorphins or whatever and makes you just go all in. And for a lot of people, and I think the reason why the marketing strategy is effective, because a lot of people, when you talk yourself into something, the will to like something, oftentimes will carry it. I mean, this was a big thing that if you guys remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the prequel trilogy was coming out, there was a lot of discussion about this very same psychological effect, with so many people refusing to see the prequels with any flaws because they were so wanting new Star Wars. Like, I don't care. This is the best thing ever. I'm just getting my Star Wars. And a lot of people are like, yeah, but it's kind of got problems. It's like, shut up. This is my, and over time, once that goes down, hindsight, people can have more rational discussions about it. Yep. But I believe that a lot of people, when you're committed, you're like, I'm going to love this no matter what. And it's working for the MCU right now. It's making a lot of people blind to the things that the MCU is maybe dropping the ball on. And
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that, getting fans who are committed and really psyched about something and they're hyped and all the rest is fine. I think the challenge with comics is it runs into a contradictory problem, which is a lot of people and the business itself, no matter who wants to agree or disagree within the companies, this business today is built on long-term collectors, people who are in it for the long haul. So if you do this to them too often, they do start to kind of get the feeling like nothing matters. And once they start to feel like nothing matters, it starts to erode them as a long-term collector fan. And I totally get the idea that you want to chase new audiences and get them, but today your bread and butter are these people who are in it for the long haul. And so acting like I don't understand why you're upset that we changed this thing that's been in existence for 20 years. It's like, well, but that's your fan base today. That's who you've got. Maybe tomorrow will be different, but today you have fans who are in it for 20, 30 years. And so when you irritate them, that is your core. You're irritating. You haven't gotten that new audience yet.
Sure. And also it goes back to the thing that I was talking about earlier about immersing yourself in this virtual world. Mm-hmm. When all of a sudden Spider-Man's not acting like Spider-Man anymore, you've been reading these books for like 10 years, not just Spider-Man, but like a lot of the other books. And this is a imaginary world that you dive into from time to time, and you're very invested in it, not just monetarily, but emotionally.
Yeah.
And when all of a sudden Spider-Man's being someone else, it's not easy to be like, whatever, he'll change later. Well, you can have that mindset, but what you're doing is you're giving into the nothing matters philosophy. And to the diehard fans that, Simpsons quite effectively kind of, mocked with this comic book nerd guy, like, it matters to them. This is a world that they care about.
Yep.
And this is a sacred cow to them. And it's like, dude, why are you messing? We spend a lot of money. Comics is not cheap. Like, and if you buy a lot of comics, it's certainly not cheap. And when these fans care about it. And I think it's, I'm not accusing anyone of being flippant, but I think it can be a flippant idea to just be like, who cares? Just wait till the next writer writes it. Well, that just means that you're telling me I shouldn't actually care much about what I'm investing into. And I don't want that. I want something that I can care about because it brings me a lot of fulfillment. Comics don't have to be the thing that brings you a ton of fulfillment. It might be something else. Everyone should have things that they are passionate about and like. And I think that's where you're seeing that complaint. And real quick, I want to address a comment that I saw, if I may. You murdered that guy. It said, the audience does not have a short attention span. All the popular stuff requires long attention stuff like Game of Thrones, Sopranos, Harry Potter, long form podcasting, live streaming, etc. Yep. I agree with you, murdered that guy. When I said about they know the audience has a short attention span, I was coming from more a corporate, executive suits in a meeting type of thing. They're marketing for the group of fans that do have the short attention span, not necessarily for you or for me or maybe for Perch. I mean, I was hardcore invested in Game of Thrones. I still am. Like, I'm going to read all the books, like all those things, Harry Potter. Like, I liked all those. I've been a Star Wars fan since as long as I can remember. Like, it's the first movie I ever saw in theaters. I've seen every movie in theaters. No, what I'm saying is, if you look, like, Disney's no longer putting it to me. They're marketing Star Wars to their vision of the short attention span. I was creating an imaginary audience that corporations are marketing to. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good moment to, by the way, say thank you, everybody, for coming here. We got a nice little audience on a Friday night before Halloween and an election. It's double jeopardy. And I apologize for the little humming you may hear in the background. There's this is my punishment for not mowing my own lawn. So, okay, lesson learned. Literally, there's a guy, like a little standing mower, and he's just riding around on it. I don't even know what's going on anymore. I don't know what I'm paying for. But anyway, all good stuff. A lot of great comments in the chat. I mean, this is one of those cases where there's been a lot of really kind of incredible questions and good conversation. And again, thank you all for coming here. I know I say it in the past, but I'm always like surprised people show up. So thank you everybody for coming. It's always
I'm not surprised people show up. You do a good show, Perch, and you have a really good. Sometimes people make fun of you, and I'm kind of guilty of this. I call you a fence sitter. But you have a really good way of keeping all sides in the discussion. And I think there's way an abundance of, podcasts and YouTube channels and things that are like highly targeted special, like this is our opinion and we do not break from it. And there's plenty of that. There's very few people who do what you do. And you're well-spoken and you're knowledgeable about your topics. So you don't give yourself enough credit.
You're very kind. And I have the best audio. So even when I've got a nice setup here, there's a guy with a mower just screwing up my audio. So that's always so super that's happening. Thank you.
Why is he wearing an IDW hat?
Exactly. I keep expecting some kind of torture here. At any rate, this in theory will. Oh, now he's actually blowing right outside my door. He's got that thing going on. All right. Sorry, everybody. So
it adds to the fun. You know what? Everyone just get a drink, and you will.
Hope he goes away.
You will. Well, I mean, you'll just enjoy it. It'll just you'll feel a little bit loose, and it's all good fun.
Yep. That's the problem with doing a whiskey sour here is I can't easily whip up another egg white, so I'm just going to start hitting the whiskey directly here out of this bottle. So
see, that's why I did the bourbon, because I was like, I can't just keep making Moscow mules. Or the bourbon straight.
That is a wise decision. Hey, again, thank you to everybody in the chat, and Mr. Templesmith. Wonderful to see you again. So I'm the biggest fan of this guy. incredible work. So if you've read 30 Days of Night and many other things, this guy is just an incredible talent. So I apologize if I'm gushing over you here, but I'm always blown away by your work. And thanks for joining the rest of us tonight. I'm really glad.
Actually, and I probably shouldn't say this, but because I got the alcohol in me, I'm just gonna be free flowing. I've actually been reading Ben Temple's 30 Days a Night on my stream. I do a story time stream where I read comics to people, and for Halloween, one of the comics like was 30 Days a Night, and I'd never read this book before, and I'm loving it. Like I was like, wow, why have I not read this? I've been having really good fun with it.
It is. I told the story before. I'll just quickly. I was late to reading this book. It was one of the times between when I had a shop and then was doing consulting work and then another shop after that. And I picked this book up and put it on a plane. I was traveling across the country to Atlanta, and I read this thing on the plane. And I was just riveted by this book, and I knew there was more. So I landed kind of late in Atlanta. When you're going west to east, you get in rather late. And I felt this panic that I had to pick up the next issue that night. So I'm frantically, like, I get the rental car and then like an insane person driving around Atlanta through Buckhead and some of these neighborhoods trying to get to a comic shop before it closed so I could get this other issue. And I know it's a kind of sad, sappy story, but that's always my Temple Smith kind of memory, is that this guy, one of the few people that drove me to, like, I've got to frantically get more work of his. So if you haven't seen what he does, highly recommend it. He's an excellent talent.
Yeah, and he says my 30 Days a Night. Steve, now mute your mic for a second, Perch.
Yeah.
He says my 30 Days a Night. Steve Niles wrote them, except for 30 Days Red Snow.
Absolutely.
I try to always make sure that I always credit artists and writers kind of as 50-50.
Absolutely.
Because I don't really know all of the who did what's. I mean, I know a writer and an artist is different, but to me it's like a team thing. And so yes, I consider, even if you were just hired to draw pictures, like that product came out the way it was because of what you brought to the table. And like I said, I'm floored. I did not expect to love this book. You brought super, like, your storytelling ability adds so much to the product, the final result. And it's one of the things I talk about on the Storytime streams. We read the books and we talk about them, like the atmosphere. Like, Steve Niles tells a wonderful story and it's great, but the atmosphere, it's not just even the illustrations. It's how I don't know how else to describe it, but the way Ben moves the camera. There's no real camera, obviously. He's the artist, but he's got great storytelling instincts or skills, whatever the two, and it really helps that book move, and it brings that atmosphere. Horror is a genre that I rarely read because I'm like, you can't do it good in comics. Mm-hmm. But 30 Days a Night does it good.
It absolutely does. So definitely check that out. I apologize. He'll stop embarrassing him now, but I am, we're going to figure out the virus, and I'm coming over for that scotch. We're going to do it sooner rather than later. We badly need to do it. Since we're both up in the same neck of the woods. I had a customer once, and I think this was extremely, this always stuck with me too. His art is unsafe. And I mean that as it is a compliment. It is, you don't feel safe watching how he illustrates and how he puts together. It is excellent use of the camera. I think that's another great way of saying it. So anyway, great stuff. So thanks for joining us tonight, and it's good stuff. That is a good.
I didn't know you didn't even know he watched the channel. I was like, what a coincidence. Awesome.
It's excellent. And definitely, if you're looking for something in this season, Halloween, there's some wonderful horror books there, and you cannot go wrong going for that book. So I'll throw this up there as well, just as because I bounce around. So Superman, I missed this era. I wasn't alive during this era, but to me, these are some of the best Superman books. Now, it wouldn't work today, but this was Superman being a complete dick. Do you know this era, right, Ash?
It's the golden age, man.
Yeah.
This is another book that I was doing on the story time. I was doing Superman 1, which reprints a lot of golden age stories, and it's like, if you didn't know, you will be shocked at what Superman used to be like. Simon and Schuster's vision of Superman is not what we have today.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, Superman was a prankster. He was like the original troll.
Yeah,
and he was great.
They're fun. They are super fun to read once you understand like but essentially what you're about to illustrate here. It's super fun to read for this reason.
Well, I mean, almost every issue was done in one. I think to almost every issue, and Superman seemed to be kind of his main mode seemed to be screwing with Lois, and I don't know why that was the story they wanted to tell, but there was, I mean, in the panel there on the left, Superman has basically de-aged Lois into a baby, and is flirting with this rival of Lois Lane's while feeding her as a baby and threatening to spank her. I mean, this was a comic DC produced. I mean, what do you even do with that? I don't know.
Yeah, and I was about to type a comment here while you were talking. You know, I kind of did mix this up a little bit. I conflated the two. I was talking about Golden Age, and this really isn't Golden Age, obviously, but it's the Golden Age Superman that sort of allowed this Superman to come, because you know, today we all have this vision of like Superman is the symbol of hope, and he's not flawed. I mean, we have all these like sacred cows on Superman. Superman used to just be this kind of guy that like beat up people and threatened their lives. And like one of the issues, like he takes over playing on a football team, knocks his guy out, and says, I'm going to takes his place on the football team so he can like get the other guys or cheaters or something. It's weird stories, but that character allowed for this to happen because they weren't breaking any sacred cows. And Superman essentially was just a super man. he was a man in, you know, whatever areas appears, the 50s or the 60s or whatever. Imagine that. I mean, and if you can't imagine that, you can go watch the show Mad Men and see how men were. It's like, and now imagine you had superpowers and you were a madman, you know, like, oh, and I could totally see how his behavior is. It just makes so much sense.
It was fun. And what's funny is that, you know, we think a lot about kind of modern times and characters like not acting like themselves. And so one of the fun things to do is the evolution of how some of these characters behaved. I mean, they've been changing constantly. And this was an era where, I mean, Superman's clearly having a lot of fun. He's making out with somebody else's wife. There's a panel I don't have on here where he first met his cousin, or when his cousin first kind of came to Earth. And I'll use it next week. But Superman's basically kind of pondering like, you know, in this culture, you shouldn't marry or date your cousin. But I don't know. I mean, we're aliens. It could be okay. And he's like kind of talking himself into it is amazing stuff. And it is hilarious. This is an era of comics. If you haven't kind of gone into Superman during this time period, and you just want something light to kind of relax and laugh at, there's so many amazing comics during this period that are just hilarious.
This is back in an era when comics were not marketed towards comic nerds.
Sure.
Everyone who bought a comic was a normie. 100%. And so they didn't have this culture of like geekdom and things. Like it was like, we want to see characters that are like very much like the world we live in.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just like if you watch the TV shows, you know, back in the 60s or 50s, you know, like this is how people behave because that's how the society of the time wanted to consume the fiction, you know, like that looks like the world that I'm in. Like it makes sense. It feels right. Today, comics are very much targeted for the people that go into the comic book store, which is a very niche group of people who have a very specific, usually worldview. And like it's exploiting the geekdom. And it has been that way for decades. But back then there was no geekdom to exploit. So it's hey, Superman's just a dude and he's a man's man.
It was fun.
Yeah, and it was fun. And then when you go back from today, it's even kind of in some ways more fun because you're like, holy cow, what the heck is going on?
I just it is a good palate cleanser for all the stuff. And here is where, again, it would never happen, but this is the next Zack Snyder Superman movie they need to do, is set in this era where he's just running around and screwing with people. I mean, there's shots of him like depriving Aquaman of water and kind of setting up Batman as a witch. And I mean, they're just Superman is all over the place. Like the next omnibus they need to make is just a giant omnibus of Superman being a dick, and just I would buy and read that all day long. It's
especially if they titled it that would like Superman the Dick.
Yeah.
Like I would just be like, sold, give me a copy.
And I think it would be healthy too, because you weren't meant to take it so seriously. So on all the sides of our culture war who want to kind of get too much on this and too much on that, this was like Superman is saying, drink up baby or pop a spank. I mean, how you can't be, you know, you just can't be wrapped up in that. It was very good. This is a great comment. Yeah. Superman was basically frat guy Borat with God abilities. And that is completely, I'm going to start doing reviews of those stories because they're just so wonderful. And anytime you get too hung up in what Marvel or DC are doing or what this group or that group are doing, just read this stuff. It's great stuff. So, but speaking of comics coming out, so we have a next week, a relatively busy week. Whenever I look at this stuff, the thing that always strikes me, I put the carriage returns in here. Friggin' Marvel is just, they're shipping too much.
No.
I mean, it's a lot of Marvel books every week. I don't know. But there's some big ones in there. I'm curious what people in the chat are picking up here.
Just imagine it used to be 30% bigger.
Yeah. No,
they're down to only 70 books a month now.
Yeah. it is pretty insane. I mean, we have 2 Dawn of X titles next week, or sorry, not Ten of Swords titles next week. We've got some kind of Empire's End book that's just kind of in there. We have the start of this new Thor storyline that's supposed to be really super creepy. Avengers is starting their Phoenix tournament. So a lot of little things going on there. And I don't have it listed there, but I could swear there's a Spider-Man book in there. But anyway, what are you picking? Are you picking up anything here? I mean, Yojimbo you're picking up, but anything else?
So there's 3 total Marvel books I buy. I buy Thor, Venom, and Deadpool, which Deadpool is my favorite.
Next week is your week then.
So yeah. Sorry, not Deadpool. Thor. Wait, geez, I'm drinking too much. Daredevil. It starts with a D. It was close.
Oh, okay.
Daredevil is the number 1 book at Marvel. What Donny Cates is doing over there, and fortunately, he's paired. Surprisingly, like, it doesn't make sense in today's market. Normally, the rule is good writer, bad artist, or bad writer, good artist. Like, they're actually putting Marco Cicchetto with him, and they're doing a fantastic Daredevil run. I mean, geez, it's now at 23 issues and still going strong. And I mean, this is the Marvel that I used to believe had trouble doing 12 issues. Like, I mean, if you just look at the list, you can see this is a company that just celebrated their 80th anniversary falsely. That their highest issue is 38. Like, they just reboot. They're the king of reboots. So 23 issues of Daredevil at this point, and it's all Zdarsky. It's all one connected story. It all, like, for the most part, there's no real drop-offs in quality. It's the same. I can't hype that book. I mean, I want to hype it, but I promote that book. I really, if you're interested in Marvel Comics, that should be on your list.
That's a great book. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I look at this list. My thing with Marvel is, like, what I don't understand is why don't you guys get your primary books in order first before you guys start, like, branching out and doing these other things, like U.S. Agent. Who asked for a U.S. Agent book?
It's weird, right? I mean, and by the way, I'm looking forward to that book. I think Christopher Priest is on that book. I'm
sure.
Pretty good title, but I do.
Wouldn't you rather see Christopher Priest on a really good Captain America book?
Absolutely.
Right? Get Captain America in order. Get all your primary books: Iron Man, Captain America, Avengers, X-Men, Spider-Man, Hulk, whatever. Get all those going, firing on all cylinders. Everything's going great. Now, hey, we're gonna do a U.S. Agent book. Oh, cool. Let's see what else. But what's happening is all these other books are, like, misfiring and blowing up and getting canceled. And they're like, oh, by the way, we've got this D-list character that we're going to introduce, and we know it's not going to last very long because Marvel's, again, marketing towards that short attention span. They don't intend to bring you US Agent for a long-term commitment of good quality. It's like, let's get a couple books out of this. It's a bunch of, alternate title, alternate covers that people will buy a bunch, and then it'll fade off, and then we'll bring out the next version of a Doritos Locos Taco.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. I know. I agree. They know what their core books are because they do give them more marketing and they do other things with it. But it is odd. Like, because I think U.S. Agent will probably be a good story. Just like I thought the Killmonger book by Brian Edward Hill was quite good.
Sure.
But I mean, like, you could put Brian Edward Hill on Black Panther and have
like how cool would it if just Black Panther was that good all the time?
Yeah, I mean, why not just do that? And same thing with U.S. Agent, and now we're picking on Ta-Nehisi Coates too much because he was on both those books. But Priest could pretty much go to any book at Marvel right now, and I think do a great job. He's a great talent. I don't know. It is weird, and I question what it is they're doing there. I mean, I know why. I mean, you have editors who are managing a portfolio and they've got a budget and they have a lot of limited series they could do, and they're trying to kind of generate some interest. So they can put out some trades. And one of the pictures we showed last week was just how many trades Marvel's putting out right now, which is a crap ton. But so that's why they're doing this. But at the same time, why not put these known, established, great talents on your top tier books to create top tier trades? I mean, I don't know. Seems like a crazy idea, but why not?
Yeah, one thing that stands out to me on that list, I'm just sitting here looking what's on there. It's like, what's up with Web of Venom, Empire's End, #1? Have we not moved away from Empire? Did that not already just crash and burn? Like,
yeah,
we're still releasing #1s for Empire's End. What? What? All right, Marvel.
It's a weird strategy, and I think. I don't know. They've got some talent. They've definitely got some talent over there, but it is. I don't know. It's a very curious strategy, for sure. Now, meanwhile, over in DC, you've got a new issue of Batman, which is celebrating a pretty strong run right now. We got a new issue of Deceased. We have the Super Sons Omnibus, which has got to make a bunch of people in the chat very happy that that's coming out, who just really think that character got screwed.
That should be a very nice omnibus because, unfortunately, there's a finite amount of material for Super Sons, but it's 16 plus 12, so 28 issues plus an annual plus a special. So you get about 30 issues of books. Finite, can all fit in one big, thick, gigantic omnibus. You buy that thing, you own all the Super Sons material. It's nice to have it all in one big collected volume. Super Sons was fantastic. And take this from a guy who I used to mock this book relentlessly. I was like, oh God, Super Sons stupid. Like I don't understand why people, and then I was like, all right, I'll try this thing that everyone's talking about. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna eat my words. Okay. I got a big plate of crow to eat. Super Sons fantastic. And it turned me on to one of my favorite artists in the modern era, which is Jorge Jimenez. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that guy's a phenomenal talent. And it's just like, wow, this is a book that did not get its due. Fortunately, it got murdered. But if you are a fan, this will be a prize possession to have. Like you'll get it all. Yeah,
I agree. It's bittersweet because that was a good run. DC stumbled across something, but now, of course, in hindsight, we can see that it was just a brief transition to another era of Superman that was intended to be huge that didn't quite happen. But somebody asked in the chat, what about manga? So next week, I apologize, I meant to do it this week and ran out of time or brain cells or whatever you might. I will also have another picture up here where I can throw up the manga that's coming out as well. So I apologize for people getting short shafted on manga. We have the final issue of Young Justice, speaking of Bendis, that is coming out. Anything on the indies strike your interest here? Or we've heard some people in the chat talking about a couple books.
Real quick before I go on the indies, speaking of manga, I thought about you yesterday. I was at Walmart.
Uh-oh.
And I was just browsing through, and I went through the book section, and I thought about you because you're the one you do the cool videos of like I went to the bookstore and look at all the. And lo and behold, I saw My Hero Academia
Yeah.
being sold at Walmart, and I was like, and I'm not saying this is a negative. I love My Hero Academia. So if anyone's a fan, you think I'm trying to slight anything? No, I'm not. But I'm just pointing out from a selling standpoint is Viz has got their books and selling in Walmart.
Yep.
That's the key. Like it's they're knowing audiences out there, and not obviously there wasn't floods of manga at Walmart, but I was just like, wow, there's no comics, no graphic novels.
Yeah.
And there needs to be. So I just thought about, I was like, I saw that and I was like, oh man, I thought of your video you did at Perch. I'm like, Perch would like to know this.
Oh yeah.
Um,
By the way, that's should be trouble for the Western comic industry. Should be worried about that, because My Hero Academia is a very catchy series. Definitely superhero based. Reminds me a lot of kind of the era of Teen Titans and Uncanny X-Men back in the 80s. It's got that feel to it. And manga, that series has a potential to go very, very fast. And Western comics shouldn't let it take more hold than it already has. And if they're selling it, well, they're selling it at Walmart. I've seen My Hero Academia toys starting to pop up in Target and places like that. If they can get a foothold and Viz can start to put stuff in that space, that's going to be great news for Viz. That's going to be really bad news for Western superhero comic companies.
Yeah, it's, and the thing is, I'm a big, I'm an opponent to comics trying to be manga, because I think they're different. I mean, they're very related. They're like kissing cousins, but they're also very different. What makes American comics is some of the things that they do that manga just doesn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very strongly that American comics should hold on to that, but there's no reason, especially if, with the way graphic novels have proliferated, back when I started collecting comics in the 80s, graphic novel was like, a graphic novel? What are you talking? Trade paperback? What are you talking about? Like, they were really rare.
Sure.
Nowadays, like everything. And it's like, okay, your goal now, get those. Those need to be side by side with your My Hero Academia. You cannot lose the audience, because they are close enough mediums that a lot of fans will be like, I don't need comics. I can read this. They're close enough. I enjoy this. Because those fans that are buying stuff at Walmart, they're not the ones going to the comic book store for the most part, right?
It's true, and that's the threat. Absolutely, that's the threat. I mean, this right here. Here's the thing: it's there. I think there is an overlap in the fan base, particularly with things like My Hero Academia. Not so much One Piece, but My Hero Academia is one to watch, because it really does appeal to a lot of the sensibilities of. It has an interesting kind of double threat. It reminds you of kind of 80s classic superhero stories, and it's super accessible to young new readers. And I mean, I have a small sample size, but my kids in the neighborhood, their friends, I watch them. My Hero Academia catches them almost immediately, and they are hooked and wanting to go all in on that. And that's an audience that would typically have gone for the Avengers, or in fact, a lot of these kids. Again, this is anecdotal, but I watch my kids go to school, elementary school. They're going to third grade. A bunch of them have Avengers shirts on, Black Panther shirts on, Captain Marvel from the movies and everything else. And then this year, everybody's doing school from home, and they're talking about books you're reading, and half the class is reading My Hero Academia. These are the same kids that had Avengers and Spider-Man and everything else the year before. And I'm sure they don't hate those things. They're still, I sure like those properties, but they're reading MHA, and they're going down that path. So, I mean, if you're Marvel DC, I think you need to worry about that. It's dangerous.
Certainly. And I'm old school, started collecting comics in the mid 80s guy. I love My Hero Academia. Like, it does a lot of things better in it that Western comics are supposed to do that they're not doing. And that's one of the big dangers for me, is because I see Marvel and DC trying to do with like 5G. I see these big corporate entities trying to be like, we're trying to be new, we're trying to be fresh and target, Generation Z. Like, we don't want the dad's comics anymore. We want the new. And I'm like, okay, I get that. That's smart. You should want the new audience. But let me tell you what you guys are doing, putting in your books, is nothing what My Hero Academia is doing. All these things that you think is making your comic feel young and fresh and targeting, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And the kids are going for the My Hero Academia, which doesn't have any of your guys' crap in it. And it's telling really good stories with really fun characters, and it's making it very accessible, like Perch mentioned, you know. And anyways, I could sit on a soapbox forever on this. Went away from the topic, which was
true. And I maybe I should go into it more depth and should do some videos on the service. Why this is a threat? Why something like My Hero Academia is different from a Ranma 1/2 and titles like that. That I do love those titles as well, but it is very much it's not like My Hero Academia. I would never describe as a Japanese comic. Yes, it is from that region, but it's very much a superhero comic, and it's going to hit that audience. Now, granted, I think you can put out great work, and there is room for both, but My Hero Academia is telling a story that is just way more accessible and easy for people to jump into than, say, the Avengers or Justice League. And so you've got this new wave. You have the Western publishers correctly saying that they need to get new kids, they need to get a new audience, but the people who are doing that really well are companies that aren't them. It's My Hero Academia. It is what Scholastic's doing. They're the ones who are actually accomplishing getting that audience. So if you play this out 10 years from now, I mean, My Hero Academia is one of those things. If the creator doesn't, nope out of doing more titles in the future, can go on for like 20 years and be a massive franchise. It has that strength to it, and we'll see how it plays out. Anyway, crazy.
Back to the independent. Should we?
Back to the independent comic. Yeah.
The things that stand out for me, and this is the thing, I'm really starting to slide over to indies, and Capes is my bag. Marvel is where I come from. X-Men it's always going to have a place in my heart because that's the series. When I jumped into comics, Chris Claremont was doing his epic run. I have most of the Chris Claremont run. I mean, I have all of it if you count reprints, but that's where I come from. I got into DC in the modern days because when I came back into comics several years ago, I hated what Marvel was doing in 2017. I just couldn't stand it. So I figured, hey, I don't know a whole lot about DC because I ignored it back in the day when I was a Marvel fanboy. So here's a whole new world of comics to explore, and I love it. I loved what Rebirth did. I got to discover a lot of new talent in the scene. DC is doing some good stuff, so that's why I was in that. So I want one of the two. I want a big shared universe that I can immerse myself in that goes on indefinitely with superheroes. That's just so you guys know where my core lies. I like independent books, but I like them very much as a side dish, not as the main entree. But I'm finding myself gravitating over to the independent books because month after month, when I get my pools and I read the books, month after month, when I think of what are the greatest books that I'm reading right now, almost without fail, they're indie books. And those are the ones I'm striving. I want to read, and that doesn't mean obviously there's going to be crap indie books out there too. You got to find the good stuff, but. Anyways, I spent too much time talking about that.
No.
On this list, I have to say indie books, nothing on the current list except maybe crossover number 1 because I do like Donny Cates.
Yep.
I'm interested to see what he's going to do. One of the reasons I love Donny Cates, though, so much is because he's one of the few people in modern comics that understands what I just talked about continuity and things mattering. If you read comics and you read all the Donny Cates books, the one thing you will get, love or how much you like his writing, period, is his stuff matters. When he kind of blew up off of Thanos Wins, the things that happened in that book are still coming. Like new things are mattering to that right now.
That's true.
I mean, Silver Surfer Black tied right into it. What's going on in Venom right now is tying into it. The King in Black is tying it. Like so many things all together. And I feel like Donny Cates is like this little mini Marvel universe. And so one of the things I love about him is I'm like, oh, I just got to devour. I'll just get this little portion of the Marvel universe where things matter and it's fun. He gives me that experience that I miss. Crossover, I'm not invested in. So I'm like, might be written good. Might be good. I don't know. But none of the books that I'm hugely like ecstatic over. I mean, I think the Walking Dead Deluxe is a cool idea. I hope that it takes off and people enjoy it.
I mean, it's selling money. It's one thing again that I wish Marvel and DC would do more of. They've got decades of back content that they could, go and mine, and kind of like the idea earlier, they could get, modern artists to redraw some of those stories. It wouldn't sell huge numbers, but in many cases, it's a safer bet than, some of the things they put out.
What I would like to see doing, you touched on something that I've been wanting forever, is recoloring. Right, a lot of the coloring of old comics was done based on limited means on newsprint. They had to do a 4-color printing process, and you couldn't do some of the stuff you see today due to digital coloring and high quality paper. You just couldn't do it, despite how great of a colorist you might have been talent wise.
Right.
But today, with the high quality paper and the digital coloring techniques and things, you can do some amazing things. And I would like to see some of this great art from the old days.
Oh, yeah.
They penciling. There were some great pencilers, 30, 40 years ago. Like, ooh, but the art was just straight, flat, 2-color process. Like relaunch those books, do a classic version of those books, and hire a digital colorist. You're gonna pay a little bit of money, recolor that line art. And wow, I would love. They did this. You can get this right now if you're interested. The Walt Simonson Thor run. They did this only in the trades. You can get 4 volumes of trade paperbacks of the Walt Simonson Thor run, which to me is one of the best Thor runs, period. And it's all recolored.
Yeah.
And it's not even the best example of what I'm talking about. I think they could do even better than what they did in this book, but it makes it does look better in ways, because when you take that old 4-color process and you put it on, especially digital, it does not look right digitally. So I think that would bring old fans back as well. That's a key, because you want to not just appease the fan. You're not here to just make fans happy. I mean, you're here to make money. So, but making fans happy correlates to making money. So, you want to get new fans to try some of this old stuff that they missed. And in addition, maybe get some of those old fans to be like, hey, I'll re-buy this because I loved it to begin with, and now I get to see more premium coloring. Let's try it out again.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely money to mine there, and I hope they do. I think it would make a lot of sense. Lane asks, do we think we're going to get Saga back? Yeah, Saga will come back at some point. I think at this point we're looking, I'm going to say, God, where did I hear this from? I can't remember now if this is a rumor or somebody's hopeful guess or like accurate information. I heard March of next year is when we're going to get Saga back again. So take that with a giant grain of salt, because now I'm struggling to remember if this is a definitive word I heard or not. But I would expect next year we will see it back, and I think March is probably a safe month to look for. So hopefully we do get that back. I mean, whether you like the title or not, that title did really well in my shop. And I know a lot of comic shops would love to see that one back on the shelves. So I hope so. We need more top selling books. But speaking of books, so this, we do this. I do this from time to time. It's kind of a fun thing to look at. So comics sold this week in the past. We got this, the Punisher, this kind of first appearance of the Punisher.
I wish I had that book.
Yeah, that's a pretty classic. You have Michael Mignola there on Doctor Strange, I believe. Yes, you do. And you have whatever the hell Captain America is up to there. But some pretty insane books up there. I mean, this was this week, and you'll see as we go through some more pictures, but there were some pretty crazy books that were out around this time.
Yeah, these weren't books other than Spider-Man. Oh, even at the time, I didn't start off as a Spider-Man guy. So these are books that I would have skipped on the rack. Later on, I discovered how awesome Spider-Man and Captain America are for me. But at the time, as a teenage kid, I was just like, whatever, Spider-Man and Captain America are dorky. But I love the Punisher, and I know Captain America is one of my favorite heroes nowadays. So, and Spider-Man actually too. Like I miss these.
Oh yeah,
that's always the buyer's remorse too. You like look and go, I could have bought these, but I was stupid.
Oh, What's funny is I have memories of some of these books because I'm old. Being well, maybe not some of these books. I know a couple of them, like the Vision Scar. I remember seeing these like on a spinner rack in a grocery store, and it's just it's associated with that. And it is funny how many of these come by, and you're like, man, I could have picked that up and had some money now. It's frustrating, but anyway, it's some great stuff. You'll notice kind of as we go, kind of the goofiness of. Somebody saying, is that Captain America fighting on a giant typewriter? Like,
Yep.
and yet I take this over our current Cap run right now.
And now you know why 13-year-old me saw this on the stands and was like, there's a dude with a shield who's wearing a flag for a costume and he's fighting on a typewriter. I was just like, nope. Yeah. You could not convince me to buy this book. But I didn't have the scope of view that I do today.
No, it's true. Check this out. So from the DC side of this was the week we got Ronin. Yeah,
Ronin.
Well, I mean, this book. Cool, but yeah, this is a great book. It is. I mean, some pretty amazing stuff here. I think The World's Finest was a good issue of Superman and Batman. We had kind of very old school All-Star Squadron, Superman fighting a clock for some reason. Just some great stuff. I don't know. It's weird looking at this stuff and thinking about kind of some of the comics that have come by, but what's weird, Ronin is not, I rarely hear people talk about it these days. And yet, yeah.
Well, Frank Miller has fallen by the wayside. He's not the superstar that we once viewed him as because he proved to be fallible, right? And then that happens all the time when you're like this god of whatever you're doing, and then all of a sudden you do something dumb, and then it's like, oh, you do bleed.
Yeah.
And for 20 years Frank Miller has been bleeding. So, but for a while when it was like, hey, what have you done? I did Dark Knight Returns. Uh-huh. Oh, you're the guy. You're the best that there is. That's how it used to be. It's really weird how views have changed over Frank Miller versus like my generation versus new generation.
It's tough for me to see people take shots at people during that era because there's like, I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a big kind of Twitter brigade after John Byrne talking about how he wasn't that talented and overrated and all the rest. And same thing has happened with Miller. And I mean, everybody can like what they like, but good Lord, I mean, it's funny. It's weird to me always how the comic industry wavers between we stand on the shoulders of giants that came before us to kind of build up these universes and screw those guys 20 years ago. They were a bunch of have-beens. I mean,
I was just thinking of that saying. Yeah. And how the later generations forget the perspective because we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And sure. The reason why Byrne and maybe Frank Miller don't seem as impressive today is because they pioneered the things you take for granted.
That's exactly
true. I talk about this in film all the time. I don't want to derail the conversation, but it's a similar type of thing where, new filmmakers are doing things that other ones had to pioneer. And so now you've seen it, you're like, oh, I watched that old film, doesn't impress me. It's like, yeah, it's because you didn't know what it was like before that film came across. And they revolutionized every way that we see. Frank Miller changed how we see comics.
It's true.
Before Dark Knight Returns, the way of comics and the way that, more importantly, the people like you and I were going into a comic book store expected our comics to be like was just different. After Dark Knight Returns came out, we fundamentally saw what comics could be like in a different way.
Yep.
And then of course creators also saw that, and then they started doing comics in a different way. And you fast forward 40 years later, and it's, well, maybe not quite 40 years, but 35 years later, and everyone's like, oh, what's the big deal of Dark Knight Returns? I read it. It wasn't that impressive. It's like, well, yeah, because you don't have the perspective to see that he made that. He made anyways.
I think that's very true. And I think that there is this kind of reverse way of looking back at things. And I think there's also this behavior of, we have to do better than the people who came before us, and frustration that sets in when you don't. And in many cases, the comic industry, if you're, depending on how you analyze it, there's zero way for the comic industry to actually sell as many copies today as it did in the 80s by the simple math of distribution. I mean, forget about whether a comic is good or bad or whatever else. You're not going to be able to do that unless you fundamentally change the places the comics are going. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, and then I watch people get bitter, like, oh, why are you complimenting this guy who sold 1 million copies? You know, he wasn't that good anyway. And it's this bad cycle of just bitterness and jealousy that is pointless as well. You're playing a completely different game at this point. So I don't know. I really dislike it when people take shots at, you know, stuff that came before that really had some legitimacy and paved the way for a lot of these creators.
Yeah, I don't like it either, but mostly it just exposes them for me.
For sure.
The reason I don't like it is because there's a lot of people who maybe don't have my length of time on this planet, and so they don't see through what, you know, the criticisms, because maybe they've only been around for 20 years and to them comics are everything after the crash.
Sure.
And then it bothers me because I think it creates misconceptions. But for me, I know what excuse me, what these guys have done. I know why it's so important. And when I see some Twitterati person try to make claims, I'm just like, all you're doing to me is exposing that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's like, but it's frustrating to see that. I hate when I see misinformation perpetuated by more people who don't know what they're talking about, and they're just like, well, this other guy said, and now I'm saying it too, and you're just like, oh geez.
No, it's the same. I know I get into trouble with some people. It's the same kind of romance that some people have with the 90s as well, of like, you know, I get that everybody comes in a certain era, but you know, there's good and bads about every period, and to kind of go too extreme in one direction or another, you miss out on a lot of really cool books. But anyway, and this is true. So this is a comment, and don't get me wrong. I mean, it's about extreme. It's about balance, right? You don't put everything up on a pedestal, because at the same point, and I do this, and I know people get irritated from time to time, you go back and actually look at some of those comics in the 80s, and there's some amazing comics back then. But there's also some crap. I mean, it's not like everything was perfect, and you can't just say, "Hey, this era it was flawless," because there's a lot of nonsense. And
oh, for sure.
I mean, I'm doing this stuff with the DC Universe decisions for a reason, because it's hilarious and it's politics time. But that was a terrible book, and I really,
right. The thing about the past is the cream rises to the top.
It's very true. Yeah.
So when you look at things, and it's not even just comics. I mean, you look at movies, books, music. Like when you're looking at the past, all you're looking at is the stuff that was so good that it stayed around and people still talk about it, like Dark Knight Returns. No one's talking about the 95% of the trash, you know, that was coming out as well. And so if you weren't around during that time, then it doesn't even necessarily exist to you. You're like, oh, I don't know, you know, and that's just the way, you know, going forward, you know, 20 years from now, most of the crap that's coming out will be long forgotten, and there'll be some few books that will be talked about.
You're right.
And then the audience of that day will be like, well, you know, it's not like the 2020 was that good in comics. And it's like, you know,
you'll always go back and forth. And I think the balance is, you should be able to look back and say, hey, there were some amazing books down there back in that time period. We don't have to tear them down. We shouldn't. Because again, I the stuff that's going on with Byrne over the last 2 weeks, and it was really disappointing to see, you know, current comic creators kind of chime in on that. Like, he's not that good. And it's like, you know, many of you would not have jobs, just bluntly, if some of these people hadn't done what they've done. So you don't kind of hold it up as this untouchable era. But at the same time, I do think you can say, hey, this was a good, you know, a great book with a great run. I think you look at Byrne's Fantastic Four, and I think you have to say, look, there's the, you know, that's the gauntlet. Go take it. You know, if you're Dan Slott, you know, give us a better run than this, you know, John Byrne Fantastic Four, Jonathan Hickman Fantastic Four, or one of these other amazing runs. That should be what you're shooting for, is to be able to top it or create as good a story. And I don't know. I think you can be balanced with it, and it's fun.
Well, the thing is too, like, there is legitimately great stuff coming out today, like legitimately. And when I got back into comics, I kind of came in a little bit sour, thinking that, you know, having the attitude of like, oh, modern comics just don't compare to the old comics. I think the perspective that someone like myself has is not that they can't make good comics or they aren't making good comics. It's more of like they're just making a lot of more trash comics. I think what made previous eras stand out wasn't that like, oh, well, that was the only era that made good comics. No, it's more of that era made a lot less
Comic.
bad comics.
They also just made less comics.
Well, they did. That's true as well. They made a lot less comics, and that's probably contributed. If they tried to make as much as they did today, it would probably be a lot of trash.
For sure.
But and that's where you see old farts like me come in, and I'm like, well, it's more of like, you know, there wasn't 50 god awful, just horrendous, I can't believe this got published comics coming out of Marvel. There wasn't even 50 comics coming out of Marvel. You know, Marvel's worst comic was still had a modicum of quality to it. You may have thought it was garbage, and certainly Marvel did make garbage in the past. I mean, NFL All Star or whatever that it's like All Pro, that's what it's called, NFL All Pro. But it was very more rare, and I think the amount of great comics probably is in the same small percentage. But I've read stuff in the recent era, the last several years, that wow, you know, that just like blew me away.
Oh yeah. There are definitely good comics being produced today that 20 years from now will say were amazing runs. There's no, you know, anyone who says that all the comics today are garbage and is crazy. I mean, there are definitely some good books to be written, but I do think, you know, you're hitting on something. There's just a lot more volume, and it feels like it's more of a volume play, particularly with Marvel, and DC has scaled back a bit. I'm hoping that, you know, as they get their house in order past Future State and they get into the new world, you know, focus on putting out a set of really great books, sell less, and just make them great and or as good as you can. And don't, I think for a while DC was trying to match Marvel kind of in terms of volume, and they were up publishing things that they really didn't have the money to produce or the thoughts or the energy to produce. And so less of that, please. I mean, oh well. Anyway, so here's some more books. So this is kind of my favorite X-Men event of all time. The Fall of Mutants remains kind of one of my 9 issues and done. Did you go through that series?
I believe that's when I got into comics.
Yeah.
I came into comics on X-Men, well, as a like ongoing. I had read comics previously, but my first, like, I'm starting to buy comics was X-Men 210. And it's easy to remember when I got into comics because that was the month that Marvel did the big 25th anniversary, put all the characters around the border. And so I believe Fall of the Mutants was right then.
What I loved about this event is you had X-Men, X-Factor, New Mutants, and you had kind of 3 stories going on in parallel. And actually, in all honesty, you could read just one of those books and get the 3 parts and have a full story. You didn't have to read all, but it was a case where when you read all 9 of the books, it gave you kind of a really great overview of everything that was going on and some really troubling times that were lined up for the 3 different teams. But it was 3 very different stories. I mean, Claremont, Louis Simonson, I believe, on X Factor, and who would have been writing New Mutant at that time?
Well, Claremont wrote some of the New Mutants, if not all.
God, I can't believe
the early New Mutants was Claremont.
Yeah,
Claremont and Sienkiewicz.
I want to say it was still Claremont, but somebody in the chat will point out that I'm an idiot here in a moment. But it was a very well coordinated. It was just a good 9, and you got so much story. That's the other thing is
so much.
It's crazy. There's something in the storytelling, whether it's decompression or whatever else, that you pick up that comic and it's like it's a very dense story, and I mean that in a good way. You got a lot for that comic. By the way, everybody who's come and now leaving because it's getting late, thank you very much for joining us. We're having a good time, so if you're hanging with us, thank you again for joining. But
yeah, thanks for participating in chat too. I know I don't respond to necessarily everything that's going on, but I am reading a lot of the chat, and it's fueling a lot of ideas for me. And I'm glad that you guys, I mean, everyone, this is like a participatory thing, like not just us two. Like, yeah, I love hearing what everyone has to say. It's cool.
It is no, it's great. I love the chats and the fact that we have some very different views. We got people kind of who have look at the comics industry in very different ways, and we all have a good time talking together. It's like, that's all I could hope for. That's the reason why we do this every week. For sure. So it does look like Chris Claremont, by the way, just in terms of my quick search. It was Claremont on New Mutants and on X-Men, and then Louise Simonson on X Factor. But Mark Silvestri, Walter Simonson, Brett Blevins on the 3 books respectively. And yeah, Fall of Mutants, I think just an excellent X-Men event with a lot of things going on.
Yeah, so I was a little bit mistaken. I always mix these two. I came in during Mutant Massacre, which happened before this.
Yes.
But also Fall of the Mutants was great too.
Yeah, it was a good
and
time.
Everything you said is right on, because I was anti New Mutants. I hated New Mutants. Not because the book was bad, but because I didn't read it and I was just prejudiced. I was like, I don't want to read about some dumb kids that aren't real X-Men. Again, I'm a 13-year-old kid at the time, 14, whatever. And I'm just like, I don't want to read about the kids. Like, it's dumb. So I didn't. And what Perch said is true. I read Fall of the Mutants from just reading X-Men and X Factor. And I didn't get part of the story, but I got the story.
Yeah. No, it was you could just read X Factor. And by the way, this was an excellent introduction of Apocalypse and his horsemen and death. And Apocalypse was not involved in a weird long lost romance with his wife that was separated on a different island of Krakoa. I mean, it's just good old Apocalypse. It was some good. Love it.
This was good old Apocalypse. You know, one of the cool things, the way they did events back then, Perch, was you would read these crossovers like this, and you'd say the X Factor issue. What you were reading was the part of the story that took place over in X Factor, right? Like, it was the X Factor. It was an X Factor book. It was the story that took place in X Factor. If you weren't an X Factor fan, let's say you were just like, I don't give a crap about those guys, I just want to read my X-Men. You missed out on what X Factor was doing, but all the pertinent stuff to X-Men happened in the X-Men book. And if you were just a completionist and said, I just want to know everything that's going on, you could get that. But there was a very different attitude, it felt like, in how they did crossovers back then, where they were really just telling you, here's what happened in this corner of the Marvel universe, rather than, in order to follow the next part of the narrative, you need to go to this other book. It didn't work that way. It was more like, this is happening everywhere. You pick the portions where you're curious about, like, what part of the stories you want to read about. And it worked.
And it did. I like that. I mean, I think they were mixing it up more back then, and it really did feel like you had a little bit more option to what you came in and out of, and the stuff that happened in these stories matter. And if you think about kind of events today, and when people die or they change, and how quickly things just kind of turn around, and Loki dies at the beginning of War of the Realms, and then he's back at the end of it. If you think about X Factor here in this cover, this introduced Angel as, Apocalypse's horseman, and he's still dealing with these changes today. This is now almost 30 years later, and it is at least 30 years later, and a lot of these character changes are still in effect. I mean, this was substantial in terms of what it did. Same thing with X-Men, and what they did with kind of the Siege Perilous and going to Australia and storyline. Lots and lots of stuff. And it feels like New Mutants is kind of referencing New Mutants today, back then, with what they're doing with Doug.
Another thing that they did, I just remembered, is like using Mutant Massacre as an example. I'm pretty sure someone's probably going to correct me, but I'm like, if there was a really important plot point that was important to the Fall of the Mutants that you just could not miss, like you would be like lost, they would tell that plot point in like all the books.
They would. Yeah. They would make sure.
So you would see sometimes a scene happen in X Factor that also happened in X-Men. You're like, wait a second, I saw this scene already, and not the exact same like art and everything, but basically the same play out kind of the same. So that readers, if you were only reading X-Men, that was another way you followed the story, because all the important book parts that you needed to know happened in like all the books. And then the crossover portion was like, and here's all the stuff that is important to X Factor. Here's the stuff that's important to New Mutants, and if you were a fan of those books, you'd get them. And if you're a person who's like, I can't miss anything, then of course you'd get them too, but you didn't need to. And it was a low pressure incentive that I liked. I really respected.
It was. I think, and I think it worked as well.
Yeah.
That tease. Ian here is asking, what were the books that DC didn't have the oomph to? What he's meaning is more, why did the New Age of Heroes fail? What did they do wrong? What did you go all in on the New Age of Heroes when that was out?
I went almost all in. 8 new titles is a lot to absorb,
It is.
especially when I was like, 8 New Age of Heroes came out at a time that I was just getting in back into comics, and I was deciding to be a collector again. And I was just dipping my toes into DC, and I'd already decided, like, well, okay, I'm gonna get, Superman, I'm gonna get Batman, I'm gonna get Hal, or was it one of the whatever the Green Lantern book was at the time, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps.
Mhm.
So I'm picking up like some of the main staple, what you consider DC books, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, and then we got 8 new books, and I
Yeah.
love New Age of Heroes. New Age of Heroes is what made me be able to appreciate DC. Like, go, oh, I like these classic characters, Superman, Batman, etc. But also these new, fresh identities of DC that aren't just what I constantly complain about DC. I feel like they're what I call them very incestuous, in the sense that they're constantly regurgitating the same characters, just with a new version of Superman, a new version of Batman. There's a new Aqua character, there's a new Flash character, there's a new Green Lantern character, like over and over and over. It's like the seven. Like, can you guys make new characters? Do we just
Yeah.
need 15 Batman? Like, or some variation of Bat, like a Robin, Batman, Batgirl, Bat something, the Signal. Like, you just can't stop making Bat things. I don't like that. I hate it. I don't like legacy characters just in general. I think it just diminishes the original character. So New Age of Heroes, I was like, oh, you're making all new things for the most part. Come to find out, I later would learn that Challengers was based on an old book, but to me, it was brand new. And I also liked that they were dipping their toes a little bit into Marvel's territory and saying, oh, Marvel, you
Yeah.
don't like doing these classic characters that your fans love? We'll do them. I mean, we're not going to do Spider-Man, but they made a character that felt like Spider-Man. They made a character that felt like the Hulk.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't, but it had the same. If you like the Hulk, you'll probably like this book. You're going to be predisposed. And so I was all in, man. I was like, Immortal Men. I love that book. And I was so mad as they just canceled one by one
Yeah.
those books. And it didn't feel, some of the books I knew would be. I was like, you're not going to do 8 new books. Like, some are going to fail. But they canceled Immortal Men on issue 4 when it was the second best selling of the New Age of Heroes.
Which, so we're getting to the problems there, and that's one of the one problem was the cancellation and what they kept and kind of how they kept going became very, very random, and they were not going off of what was selling well. It was very all over the place with that series, and it became very confusing as to what they were doing. It felt like they went through some efforts, they thought up these ideas, they got some creators attached to it, and before it launched, they got cold feet to some extent and said, "Oh, hang on, some of these creators, let's not have them. Let's make sure they're on more core books." And we've heard at the time now that there was a lot of rumbling within DC of, why are you putting these big name creators on these unknown books? They should be on our core flagship books. So pull them off after issue 2 or 3 or whatever it happens, and get them on the books. And I think that was definitely a problem. And then they canceled things seemingly random, and it felt very early on. At least I have my shop open, stuff's coming in, and what I felt pretty much when the first issue landed is that DC had no long-term plans for these characters, and that nobody should buy into them. That's how it was communicated to the shop. And so I don't know how much of that the fans were picking up on, but it just that was a scary prospect. If you're ordering comics, it's like, okay, if the company is not going to stand behind these characters, and I'm going to be really conservative when I order, that message is going to carry out to the buyers coming in the shop, and then none of this stuff's really going to work. And I do think they were onto a good idea, and I think they blew it.
Yeah, I really do. And in hindsight, I see what you're saying about it, how it felt random, and it did feel random at the time. But I think in hindsight, it seems very clear why the certain books were canceled the way they were is because of the creators who were on the books.
Right. You're right.
And it was clear. I think it was clear from the get-go that DC was going to pull the plug. I really, this is my own speculation, I personally believe Dan Didio pulled the plug, murdered the New Age of Heroes, and basically was like, okay, well, we're not going to sit here and have James Tynion over here wasting his time on Immortal Man, because we're pulling all these things, but James Tynion, we got a plan. We're going to put you over here.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Damage can continue because for whatever reason, DC does not recognize the uber talent that they have in Robert Venditti. I do not understand how that guy has gone overlooked for so long. He's probably one of the best writers in comics, especially when you consider ongoing comics, which is a different deal than doing a 6-issue series once a year. Like we have time to really formulate an idea, like doing a monthly title just over and over and over and keeping it fresh and good and interesting. That is a true talent, and not everyone can do that. Robert Venditti is one of the best in the business at this, and he's just gone overlooked. But anyways, so he's like, oh, you can keep doing Damage because we got nothing for you. The books that stayed were those that had those creators. Challengers, done. Scott Snyder, you're not going to sit there and do a we're going to keep Scott Snyder on this books. Like, cut that off. So that's how I look at it this time. And man, John Murphy says in chat, he says that it wasn't new and it wasn't DC. I see kind of your point, John. There were some analogs to Marvel for sure, but it felt like these type of characters that Marvel does, we're going to do it in DC, like DC's way. They didn't feel like Image books at all. They felt like DC books. But the reason I take difference with what you're saying is because Marvel and DC for ages have been copies of each other. I mean, Aquaman is a copy of Namor. Like, you know, there's arguments that X-Men is a copy of Doom Patrol, whether, you know, like you can go back through so many characters and these guys have been back and forth, just ripping each other off. Swamp Thing, Man Thing, you know, like it's so to see like DC go, oh, Damage is just a ripoff. It's just a Marvel character. It's like, no, it's the same thing that they've been doing forever, but they've been doing it kind of their own way. The problem that I had though with DC was that they weren't doing that anymore, almost in a way. Like they weren't doing original things. It was like, oh, hey, it's time to invent another Robin. We're on what, Robin 7 now? Yeah. We need another one. Like, no, can you create a new character? Like once upon a time, you made this guy named Lobo, and he was super popular. Yeah. he was different. He wasn't like, he was all original and new. What happened to that DC? That's what I wanted to see. I wanted DC to be like, here's something that's new. You can get behind and start following. If just 2 of the New Age of Heroes books would have continued, I think that would have been enough. And then you could have had the other New Age characters maybe guest starring and stuff, keep them around, kind of like, you know, why not have a Batman story that has Silencer appear in it?
Yeah, and they've tried. I mean, Bendis put Silencer in Event Leviathan briefly for like a minute. And then Sideways went into Young Justice. But right at the end, that title is canceled next week or coming to an end. So, I mean, they tried to do some things, but it feels like a wasted opportunity for sure. And I do think, you know, for sure, both companies have kind of copied each other back and forth in what they've been doing. I mean, and even with more obscure things, you have Batman, you had Nighthawk, which they were trying to kind of make a copy of. You had like Plastic Man and Captain Marvel, definitely the same. You know, all kinds of stuff. So,
yeah, it's a sore spot for me because I think New Age of Heroes was one of the coolest events and things, like the way it spawned out of Metal, which I think is a underappreciated event. I think DC was just doing so many good things at that time, and I think it just gets maligned, and people, you know, when it's canceled, no one's invested. You know, not a lot of people are invested in New Age of Heroes because it didn't last very long. So it's easy for people to critique it now and just be like, yeah, whatever. It's like, it sucks. I miss it dearly, and like I said, I just wish a handful of would have made it. I didn't expect all 8 to continue.
What makes me kind of sad is that I do think the comic industry needs to do these experiments from time to time. And so when they fail like this one, it means they're less likely to do it again. And I would like to see. And there was a comment earlier about, hey, but when you create new fans, new characters usually picked apart. And I get that that's true. They definitely, I mean, everything gets picked apart though. I mean, if you created a legacy version of the character and under a new identity, that gets picked apart even more. So I mean, you're always going to have that. But generally speaking, I think comic fans, even if they have an initial gut negative reaction, you can win most of them over very quickly with quality. Like if the story is good, people will flip really, really fast. And I mean, a classic example is X-Men was in one of the lowest of the low kind of states with Age of X-Man and some of these things. And it took Hickman all of like 1.5 issues for people to flip and suddenly start loving that whole franchise. I mean, you can move people very, very rapidly if you just start putting out something that catches with readers.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. I mean, quality matters. I mean, not all the time, I guess, but I guess what you say is more accurate. Catching with readers even more than quality. Hopefully, quality is what catches the readers.
Yeah, and usually,
but catching the readers is a big deal. I don't think it takes a long time, especially if you market it. And I guess the reason I sound hesitant is because I keep thinking of books like Hawkman, which is that and Daredevil are the best two mainstream books when I think of the big two. Like they're just heads and tails. Like I think Hawkman is the best at DC, Daredevil is the best in Marvel, and I'm not even sure there's like a competition at either. In my mind, that's how good they are, and neither one is selling. I mean, Hawkman's canceled now in November, and Daredevil. We'll see how long Daredevil goes. Across my fingers, I love it. And I go, those books don't get attention. They should. They're like the best books. Everyone, but neither of those books get attention from their publisher. And I don't see Marvel ever pushing Daredevil. I don't see, certainly Hawkman got no attention from DC. They couldn't ignore that book harder. I mean, even in their big year-long Year of the Villain event, it was like, oh yeah, Hawkman's part of it. Like, they just, and then Venditti just kind of wrote his own story that didn't even matter to the thing. Like it was, yeah. And meanwhile, they keep bombarding. Like Marvel was smart about X-Men. I mean, yes, House of X, Powers of X was phenomenal. It got me back, and I'm super sour. But Marvel also was like, kept your attention. Yeah, we're gonna keep this going. It's gonna be great, and worked hard on getting eyeballs to it. And I think that's important too. Make good comics, and then also devote attention to getting people. Don't do things like make comics that most of your fan base hate, and then market towards bringing eyeballs to that book. And then you get what's happened with Bendis at DC, where I think so much of the backlash isn't so much that Bendis is doing a book that people don't like, but that DC constantly keeps going, check this out, look, more Bendis. Don't you want more Bendis? We're even doing more Bendis. And fans are like, shut the hell up. We don't want this. If he had just quietly come on and said, hey, we're giving Bendis some books, and let the people who like it, and the people who don't, I don't think there would be nearly the outpouring. But if you constantly keep shining a light on it and saying, don't you love it? And it makes fans have to go, obviously you're not hearing us, so we have to shout louder at you. No.
So I think you hit upon something really accurate there. And I've tried to do videos on this, but I never feel like I describe it well. There's a natural effect of people, whether it's fair or not fair. I'm not saying there's good behavior, bad behavior, none of that, but it's just normal for human beings, is that if you tell them you're going to like this is the best thing ever, you want this is for you, there's almost a gut reaction to want to do the opposite, to want to say, no, you don't want to be told what to like. And I feel like comics falls into this trap all the time, whether it's, the way Marvel pushed Captain Marvel in the comics, or the way DC has done things from time to time. This is amazing. You're going to love it. Like with Bendis. Bendis is here. He's got a best book, and they start putting stuff on the cover like Entertainment Weekly's comic of the year. And it's like, you paid for that quote. But I mean, do you think, I think that's a terrible idea, because it almost encourages fans to take the opposite view.
Yes, especially when it's from the publisher, because we
Yeah.
all know, like, duh, you're the publisher. Of course, you're going to tell us your book is the best thing. Like, I think what publishers have a fine line to walk of pointing us towards books that they're excited about, but not telling us that it's the best book. Just point at it and say, hey, we're very proud of this book. Please try it. Hopefully you'll like it too. We're working hard.
And yeah,
Things like that make me go, okay. But when you go, we just canceled all your favorite books to make room for Bendis. You're gonna love it. Buy it all. Like, I'm just like, no, it creates a negative reaction to me.
it does. And yes, it is advertised, but that's bad advertising. Like, you can sell your product. It's not like people, it's not like McDonald's is doing ads saying today the burger is the best, it's better than it's ever been, and you want no other food. You come in here and eat this burger, you bastard, and it's going to be the best thing in the world for you, and no other burgers for you. Like, that would be a pretty funny ad, but there's a you have to work with your audience. You can't just kind of force feed them. And particularly when the buzz of the comic is not the best. And with Superman, like, the sales weren't there. You could go into any comic shop and get the reaction of how well this book is doing. And so kind of starting to print out stuff saying this is the best comic of the year that all the publishers are doing, it feels like you're giving the fans the finger at that point. And you shouldn't try and establish that relationship with your
especially when the fandom isn't going along with it. It's one thing when you're on a wave and you're like, let's ride this wave, right? Like Marvel did with House of X and Powers of X, right? Like, fans were loving it. So they just kind of just rode that wave. We're like, hey, we're giving you more. But comments like Horizon Brave is made in the chat about, like, hey, that's how advertising works and stuff. It's like, well, no, actually, if you remember, I'm sure you, Perch, I think you lived through this too. The new Coke debacle.
Sure.
Remember when Coke decided you don't want Coke anymore? We got the Coke you really want. We're calling it New Coke. And fans were just like, no, we want old Coke. What the hell are you doing? Yeah. And if Coke had introduced New Coke just alongside, like, hey, we got this new product, I think New Coke would have been a lot more successful, because quite honestly, I liked New Coke, right? Mm-hmm. But I also very much understood all the people that were pissed off because Coke, what we know as Coke Classic today, like, went away. Sure. It's gone. And that was the problem. Like, I'm illustrating for me, like I'm saying with DC, was like, it wasn't like they just said, hey, we got Bendis, he's doing some books, go check them out, they're amazing. That wasn't what DC did. DC's like, oh, we need to cancel all this other crap that you like, because sure, Bendis is coming and it's amazing. Oh, did you like Tomasi's Superman? Most people say it's one of the best Superman runs in the modern era. Like, oh, it's gone, we're canceling it. Bendis is here. And then it was like, well, but this sucks. Too bad. Now he's on Action Comics and Superman. You got no alternatives. And we're giving him Young Justice, and we're giving him his own imprint. Oh, and by the way, make room because Legion of Superheroes is coming. And you're just like, can we please have our books that we like back? No, Bendis is here.
Well, and I think, I get going hard. You get an acquisition and you want to make a big splash out of it, and they do that. But it's like a year down the road. And this is where the new Coke analogy is a good one. It's like, imagine if Coke would have said, everybody likes our drink the best. And they started doing ads saying, we know that there's a big fan outcry against this. We know, like, Time Magazine and others are publishing cover stories talking about what a debacle it's been. But imagine if they'd started putting out commercials saying, everyone agrees it's the best cola ever. And it just, at that point, you sound super out of touch with your audience. And that's where I think that's what DC and Marvel and others fall into from time to time. It's like, I know you want this to be true, and you should try and make it true. But, like, when you're coming out saying, hey, Captain Marvel is the most popular comic book out there, and it's like, well, the sales figures don't reflect that. Forget the trolls on Twitter or whatever else. I mean, yes, some people are always going to complain, but you have empirical hard evidence that says it's not the case. At that point, it starts to feel more like kind of fantasy wishful thinking than people start questioning if you're smart as a business. You start to make no sense.
And also, just to go back to the whole Pepsi thing, saying, well, that's not how advertising works. Pepsi doesn't say, hey, try our product. I have to disagree. In the world of advertising, one of the highest regarded advertising campaigns in history was the Pepsi challenge. It's one of the greatest things. It took a small little soda company and it challenged Goliath, which was Coke, was untouchable at the time back in the 80s. And this is why Tim Cook is part of Apple, and there's a whole anyways. Pepsi decided we're going to go balls to the wall and we're going to tell people our drink is better than Coke. But we're not going to tell them it's better than Coke. We're going to come and say, we're making a great product. We think it's amazing. We think you will too. Take the Pepsi challenge. Try it. See. And it was one of the most successful advertising campaigns in history of modern advertising. Like it just, yeah. If you do any study or take courses on they will talk about this. And the way Pepsi did it was very aggressive, but they never once said, this is the best. They challenged you to try it. And I think you can do, it's kind of what I'm trying to get at is if DC had come out and said, take the Bendis challenge, try it out. We're working hard to make good books. We think you'll like them. Try it without hurting the rest of their fan base, without saying we're taking away this, taking away that. That was the new Coke thing. Coke realized the only way new Coke is going to sell is if old Coke isn't competition.
I also think, we talk about Bendis a lot, but I also think that there was plenty of evidence to suggest that if you give Bendis lots of books to write, the quality goes down, that you shouldn't try and spread him super thin. True. And so it's weird why you bring him into DC and it's like, okay, let's get Superman and Action Comics and a little mini series going and Young Justice and Legion of Superheroes. And he's going to do some Jinx World stuff over here. And here's Event Leviathan. It's like, whoa, I get you want to, you want to maximize your talent acquisition there, but you're paying him a pretty good rate for all those pages. And from history that the quality is going to dip. So start, give him something. I would have actually not brought him into any ongoing title and had him come in and do an event book or something like House of M way back in the day where he could, start to kind of make his name over in DC. But I think they blew him very quickly. So anyway.
Mm-hmm. Not to knock. I mean, there's people who are happy with what Bendis is doing.
Oh, sure.
He does sell some books. I'm obviously speaking as a fan who doesn't resonate with Bendis, but what I'm trying to really talk about is the faux pas of how they marketed it. I think if you would have just added him to the existing mix, that here, you guys are happy with all this, we're going to add more with Bendis, give you something else to like, or not if it's not your cup of tea. But when you come in and say we're replacing the thing you love with this other thing, and we insist you're going to like it, I think that's where you become too presumptive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are some questions up there. I'm now trying to go up to remember where they were. Ron had one here, and this is other than comics. What do you think about the other mass media for comics, meaning books, movies, TVs? And I think he was really aiming it at you, but what do you think?
That's a really good question. It's like a whole conversation. Mm-hmm. I am... Okay, so obviously I come from an era, the 80s, where I was a little kid and I go to the grocery store and I found my first issue of X-Men and I fell in love with comics. And ever since then, of course, as a kid, you were like, wow, wouldn't it be so amazing if I got to see the X-Men in a big movie, big budget and awesome. And I never thought I was going to get to see that. Then, years and decades go by and then you start getting that. And you start getting movies. And a lot of them, like the 80s and 90s, man, superheroes movies sucked. And it wasn't really until Sam Raimi came along with the Spider-Man films and you're like, oh, they can do a comic movie good. And then of course the MCU. And now we live in a world where I have a whole different perspective where I'm like, okay, I've had my cake. Do I still want it? And it's not that I don't want superhero movies to exist anymore or anything like that. I don't. It's not that case at all, but I'm no longer wishing for it because I guess I've had it and I've seen what it can be, and I realize books, movies, TV, they can be enjoyable and great in their own right, but they can't replace for me what I really get out of comics, which I explained earlier in the stream about, that being that world that I invest in. And when I read about Iron Man, I get to see what's going on in his part of the world. And I go to Spider-Man and it's his part of the world. They're not always crossing over. They don't need to cross over. I just know that they're all part. The Marvel world is one thing. And I get to see different corners of it. and I get every month. I just keep going. It does. I know it's not going to end, and I can just enjoy it for as many years as I want. That's what I want out of comics. Movies, TV, books cannot deliver that. Now, MCU, for its credit, and I think this is one of the biggest geniuses of Kevin Feige, was he realized that he needed to try to capture some of that, and he did a little bit, as much as movies really can be expected to do. And bravo to him for doing that. But they can only go on so long. Actors age out, right? You know, you just you know, you're drawing Peter Parker. He doesn't ever have to age. It can just go on eternally. So I'm cool. I want to see the video games. I want to see movies and stuff. But what I don't want them to ever replace. And I see what's happening currently is a big push, not even just by the publishers or the big corporations that own the IPs, but I also kind of see a push of the fan base who love the comics, not because they actually love the comics, they love the intellectual property. They may be a Spider-Man fan because they grew up watching Spider-Man cartoons, then they saw Spider-Man movies, and they love it, and they know that it comes from comics, and that's cool. Maybe sometimes they've read a couple trades, and they've enjoyed them or whatever, but they're not really comic fans the way maybe you and I are, Perch. And that's not a slight against them. I'm not saying, oh, you're a bad person, you have to like them the way we do. But it does recognize that appeal and that desire and the way things are, that trajectory that things are moving, is taken away from something that I love. And so that's kind of my perspective on the other mediums. I want them to exist, but I don't want them to erase the thing that I love.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I was having a chat with somebody about that today. Of there's this desire to want to come in and do a different take on things, and why is that? It's a deeper conversation. We go another 2 hours, and we shouldn't do that. But it is, it's hard. You know, not everybody can have what they want, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of kind of comics is in some cases catering to some short-term thinking here, where it's like, hey, let's try something new, and you should try new things in comics. You shouldn't avoid that. But at the same time, if you have a 50-year history, and we've talked about this before, you got to figure out how to grapple with that. You shouldn't be chained to it. You shouldn't feel like you can never evolve or move things forward or do something different because you'll disrupt the status quo. But you still have that 50-year of history. And if you get too casual with it, then you're taking a massive gamble that the new fans who you're appealing to are never going to come, and you're going to isolate the old fans. You're going to be left with nothing. And so you really have to find a good way to balance that. And I think comics throughout lots of eras, including this current one, have done that just fine at times. But there is this push that you see, and Twitter's a bad place to kind of get anybody's views on anything. But
totally double-edged sword.
Oh yeah, it is. And you see some of the worst takes on books, and it's very much always seems like it's somebody's self-interest, and it's somebody's, I don't know if they're playing for likes or they're talking to their small little bubble of friends or whatever it happens to be. But it's like, I see creators from time to time going, hey, put me on Batman. I do this and this. And it's like, oh God, get that person nowhere near that comic. They will destroy it for all time. And you know, it's a tough business. I don't deny that they're making these decisions and walking that line. It's not, anyone who tells you that's easy is lying. It's not easy. How do you keep a character relevant for 60 years? That's not simple. I do think it can be done though. And I guess I come from the school of thought that, you know, if you're hired to do these jobs for these top characters, it's like being a doctor where you should be good at what you do. So if you come in to write these characters, it is hard, but that's kind of why we're hiring you. And we, you know, we're expecting you to do good things with that hard job. I don't know.
No, I think you made some good points. I think, I don't know. I obviously I like armchair quarterback comic publishers, but I think that maybe one of the keys is that publishers need to realize that, look, keeping characters relevant for a long period of time is tough, but maybe it's okay if characters kind of get pushed off to the side for a while, you know? And when I say a while, I mean like a decade or more. There was a time, believe it or not, kids, there was a time when people didn't give a crap about Batman. like Batman books didn't sell. And also there was a time where X-Men was going to be canceled.
Yes.
Because no one was interested. But Marvel kept on pushing on, and DC kept on pushing on in those books, and eventually, with the case of Marvel, like Chris Claremont and John Byrne came along and revolutionized X-Men and just gave us a whole new vision. There's been several creators to come on with Batman over the decades that have added, and to bring the Batman we know and love today, that's DC's bread and butter. But that doesn't mean Batman's always going to be that way. There's going to be a time where the new generation grows up and goes, I don't like Batman. That's not cool. Like, and usually the thing that's the big popular thing kind of has that effect anyway, right? Like with kids, they're like, no, I want this uncool thing. That's more cool to me. Like quit pushing on this popular mainstream. Batman's so mainstream and uncool, like, I can just foresee that happening. But as a publisher, my belief is that you just hang on to it and say, well, that's cool. We'll just keep publishing a monthly Batman book for the fans that remain. We'll keep it quality. And then maybe down the road, there's a resurgence and people are like, oh yeah, we missed Batman, and people rediscover things.
No, it's true. And I think this is an interesting comment. So with Wally, for example, I think you could push these characters to the side. I think you can, you can not use them for a while. You can do these things. You don't, but when you push them to the side or you set them on the shelf, you don't have to make them like a crazy mass murderer in the process. You could just put them on the shelf for a while. Like, you know what I mean? You don't have to go all in with like deconstructing these people to death. And I think that's part of the challenge of like, it's okay to say we don't really have any ideas. Maybe the interest is waning a little bit. Let's do some stuff with Barry Allen. Let's do some other stuff. I mean, I don't remember, and maybe I'm mistaken here, and I'll admit if I am, but I don't remember this big outcry about you're screwing Wally West when they kind of took him off the shelf for a while with the New 52 and other things. I mean, people definitely missed him, and there was a lot of like, when's Wally West coming back? But then they did the kid, both the age and the race swap with Wally West and the New 52. And I know people were irritated about that, and largely because they were doing a lot of that at the time with other characters. And I think that was getting a bad rep. And then they finally brought Wally back, and it was meant to be this kind of big, glorious moment. And then they quickly, threw him into having some health issues. And then the whole nonsense with Sanctuary. And it just like, they should just feel more comfortable putting these guys on the shelf for a while if they don't have anything going on. Maybe people will miss them, but don't actively try and like poke them in the back on the way out.
For sure. And one of the things to consider about Wally West, I was never a Wally West fan. I mean, I don't think I am a Wally West fan now. But if you go back in time to the New 52 era, and, Wally West was out of the picture. He'd been out for a while. Barry Allen had come back in the limelight and so forth. New 52 was not being well received at the tail end. Fans were upset about New 52 and what was going on. And DC really worked hard to woo their fandom back and say, we're doing Rebirth. We've got this thing. And Rebirth is kind of a part apology. Like, hey, we're sorry we effed up our universe. Come try it again. And if you go back and read that very first Rebirth issue, DC Universe Rebirth, issue 1. It's a one-shot issue by Jeff Johns. The whole point of the story, and it's one of the best modern comics I've read. It brings tears to my eyes. I don't know about you, but it brought tears to my eyes. I love this book. It is so good. And I don't like Wally West. I'm like, whatever. Wally West is a Flash character. I don't know squat about this character at the time. I read that book and it's phenomenal. It is Jeff Johns going, I am working my magic. I am saving the DC universe. Basically, if I picture him, he's like Clark Kent ripping his shirt open, and it's like, oh God, like I'm sold. Jump in on this. And I can see why Rebirth excited people. He did so off of the shoulders of this character, Wally West, the signal of hope, like the symbol of hope at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that point, what you're doing is saying, yeah, all you fans who've been kind of upset a little bit over the years that Wally West has been missing, we've been listening. And then 2 years later, they said, hey, Tom King, why don't you screw that character up and rub fans' noses in it? And that's why you see the outcry. Not because Wally West was put on a shelf. Fans were used to Wally West being on a shelf. What you did was you tricked them. You said, we're rebuilding our universe and we're making something great. And Wally West is going to be the heart of it. We're going to make up for his absence and you are going to love it. And then once you think it's all good and you're happy, we're going to turn him into not just a murderer, but a murderer who would frame his friends. We are going to systematically assassinate this character in a way that I don't know if it's possible to bring him back. Like, and the way that they handled it at the time was really poor as well. When fans were like, what the hell did you do? Tom King is on Twitter making light of it and kind of rubbing fans' noses in it. Dan Didio's just completely unapologetic. You get that leaked image about Dan Didio's hit list, and you're just like, DC doesn't care about us. They're back off. And this is all made up speculation on my part, but I can imagine fans just being like, DC is just, they're just laughing at us, going, oh, these fans are just upset about, like, and when you think about it that way, it enrages you. It makes you go, what the hell? And that is why I think Wally West is the way he's at. It's not just because, oh, he's on a shelf, oh, we miss him. No.
It absolutely came across that way. And that's, it kind of goes back to the advertising comments before. It's like, don't set up this atmosphere where it feels like you're rubbing the noses and you're rubbing the fans' noses in the dirt. You gotta have a better relationship than that. But hey, I do want to break the news here. So Jorge here, or George, depending. Well, now how do I pronounce the name? Congratulations here. We have one of the people in the chat released a new comics digitally. Wall Breakers, Comixology, other digital platforms. Hey, if you shoot me over a link in my email, I'll go check it out. So, well, I'll go check it out regardless. But would love to help promote it for you. And glad you're here. And congratulations on that release. That's awesome.
Yeah, congratulations, Jorge. I'm assuming it's Jorge. If it's George, please correct me.
I'm assuming it's Jorge, but we will find out. And I'll throw I can't. My email is comics with an S, comicsperch@gmail.com. So shoot me an email. One of these days I'll get fancy enough to actually put that in the video in some kind of little thing, but I'm clearly don't know what I'm doing. But hey, how about this? So we got the this was the first issue of Howard the Duck back in the day. And it's just funny to see all these comics, none of which would exist today. I mean,
oh yeah, Howard the Duck. There's a book that I would love to see. He couldn't exist today. Never mind. I would love to see it, but you're right, it couldn't exist today. That's an interesting selection of books.
Yeah. It's funny. Somebody, one of the creators was talking about how we're now finally addressing the Nazis as villains in comics, and I remember thinking exactly like, no, you had Nick Fury doing this quite. I mean, that was back in the days when they were okay with putting the symbol right on the cover. I mean, it was
right.
Like this was not new. You've had him fighting the Nazis for a while. It's not new. No, Howard could exist. I think Howard. Well, I mean, obviously there has been a Howard the Duck comic more recently, but just in this style, I think they're doing things with Beverly and I don't know. I think that would be. I don't know if that would work. Anyway, yeah. Here. Oh, thanks, Ash. Ash has got a link here. I can do some stuff with this.
Jorge says, how come Howard couldn't exist today? And my opinion is twofold. Number one, as Howard's too irreverent, he would just upset a lot of people. We live in a very politically correct world, as I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone. So a lot of that humor would have to be very sterilized. And then that when you do that, it doesn't work. And number two, there's just very few people, I think, in the comic industry today that understand comedy. Comedy is... I think dead in comic, not dead, but it's in a coma. It's in a coma. Writing comedy is hard, and getting good writers in comics is hard. And you put the two together, and this is why you don't have good Deadpool books. I mean, there's just no really good comic books, like comedy books.
Not that comedy anyway. It's a style that just, and I think it would work today if it could be done, but it's a shame.
I mean, I would like it. I'm sure there's people who don't give a crap about political correctness, but I think from a mainstream point of view, if I'm like Marvel Comics, can you imagine like if Marvel Comics put out some politically incorrect, irreverent book, and then the 12 Twitter psychos form their hate campaign about needing it to get canceled, and now because they're owned by Disney, it goes all the way up the Disney chain, and
Yeah.
it just nah.
I do hate that. I do hate the kind of the weird nonsense that goes on, and in many cases, it's based. You and I think, have disagreed on this in the past, but I think it's not usually about ideology. It's about clicks. It's about power control, and I hate that. I absolutely hate that. It's you get a handful of people that get this very small power base going, and they can make a lot of noise for people. I'm watching what's happening with Brett Booth being put on the X-Men, and it's sad to me to watch these people go at him, and it's wrong. It shouldn't be. But anyway, hopefully he can. I mean, at the end of the day, a great comic will sell. And yes, you can be funny and politically correct. You definitely can. You can be a lot of things, I think.
It does take another level of skill set, I believe.
Yes.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, one of my favorite my absolute favorite stand-up comedian of all time is a guy called Brian Regan. Some of you may know who he is. His stuff is absolutely, I don't want to say it's politically correct. It's not politically incorrect. He doesn't like walk a line of trying to be correct. He just doesn't do anything offensive, and he doesn't do anything, no cussing or anything like that. It's very clean, but it's just because that's him. And it works.
The style that he knows how to use
for what he does. Not everyone can do that, right? I mean,
right.
George Carlin, obviously, George Carlin worked because George, specifically made fun of politically correct. Like he attacked anything that became politically correct, and it was like, well, I'm going to expose how ridiculous that is through my comedy. So how you do comedy is obviously different by who you do it, but it's already hard enough to do comedy. I just don't see a big corporate entity doing Howard the Duck. That's all. I guess if an indie book, when you're in the indie scene, you can do whatever you self-publish. You do whatever the hell you want. And maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe what's going to happen is someone will self-publish something that'll become a raging success because everyone's so starved. Like, oh my God, we've been missing this for so long. And then the big corporations will go, maybe that's something we should open up to because we like money.
Yeah, I'd hope. I mean, I don't know. I think we're nearing the end of a 20-year cycle, and hopefully we get some new stuff out there, and it kind of pushes the limits a little bit. I think this is my last one, kind of some classic, but I mean, great stuff. It's fun just looking back on this stuff, remembering it, and kind of some of the. There was always so much action going on the cover, so it was a really, really, really great stuff. So,
I miss that. I miss the covers being so evocative. Like you look at the cover, and you would get a really strong sense of what you were gonna get in the book. Yeah, right? And they didn't always spoil everything. Sometimes the covers were purposely misleading a little bit, but the point was what the cover gave you. Like, this is this feel of what you're going to get. Does that fantastic, does Thing and Hulk, like that picture, does that entice you? Then when you open this book, what you get, that feeling will be continued in this book. We're going to deliver this. Yeah. Nowadays, it's oftentimes like really artistic, like, hey, look, this is like a painting that you'd put on your wall, but we're just going to have a person standing there and looking really moody. And you're just like, what is this cover even supposed to do? But besides look, I don't know, artistic. Like,
I know. I mean, it's a different model now, where you hire the artist to do really flashy pinup type art for the cover. It does not need to be at all what goes on inside, and that's the model they've got. And it's
yeah.
I mean, I definitely, some of that art is classic and great. It just I like you. I miss this time where you got some wonderful things. And there again, Marvel has all these prints. Like, you can put these out. A lot of them would sell like crazy. But let's do this. Now a bunch of people are here. Maybe I should poll people, see if they want to go later. I'm going to do two more questions, and then we'll probably call it a night if that's okay with you. We've been going for 2.5 hours here. All
right, I'm good. I'm free tonight, so I'm just riding down the river in this big inner tube of comic fun.
Very nice. So you've gotten mellow. I've been drinking and I'm out now. So now I have to.
Oh, that's a problem. Perch
Yeah.
like, we got to cut this
All
short.
right.
The liquor store is going to
Okay.
close.
Uh, but two questions here because they're big ones. So Atomic Hound saying, now that we're all drunk enough, can someone explain Final Crisis? Do you want to take a swing at this or both, or what would you like to do?
That's on you. I've never read Final Crisis.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So, Final Crisis. Let's see. I want to do this funny or try and describe it in the worst possible way. So, Darkseid's going to be reborn on Earth, and he is got a plan to get the anti-life equation distributed throughout the planet and enslave the population, including the heroes. And he succeeds, and a small resistance group of heroes has to try and get back control, which leads to Batman being shot by a time bullet that I think he purchased in the same place as the Red Skull got the time bullet for Captain America. And Superman had to fight vampire Nazi Superman. In the end, everybody was happy and they went home and had s'mores. I'm going with that.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. This was an event that went weird. I mean, it's funny because I remember starting to read this and it had a very dark kind of ominous feel. And it's like, okay, cool. And I'm a sucker for stories where, the heroes go to a different planet in the multiverse and there's evil versions of those characters. So it's like they had the moment where I think the Flashes are kind of running through time and they get slightly into the future, and Wonder Woman has been absorbed with the anti-life equation and is evil now, and she's riding a big hellhound, and it's like, oh, the world's really screwed up. And then the comic seemed to take a severe left turn. Like it just went sideways. I right about the time Batman got, shot, or no, he shot Darkseid, and Darkseid shot him with the beams. I don't remember it. At any point, it got so strange. And then Superman and the multiverse, and I think whenever DC brings in Captain Carrot, it's like, okay, you guys are
Captain Carrot's in it.
Oh yeah. No,
This sounds wild. This sounds like something I have to read.
It's definitely a tale of two comics, I think.
This sounds to me quintessentially defines one of the videos I just watched of yours recently that you did about like getting the fun out of comics.
Yeah.
And how like, even the good comics, like you can make fun of and have fun with them and stuff. And I kind of, when I was listening to your video the whole time, I was like, I don't really agree with Perch. I would love to sit down and talk with Perch about it because I don't agree. Yeah. But now listening to you describe this book, I'm like, oh, this is what Perch is talking about. This sounds like a blast.
No, I think it cuts both ways. I think we should be able to make fun of good books. Like I can make fun of Dark Phoenix Saga easily. There's wacky stuff in everything. And then I think you could take a book. Comics, generally speaking, and this is just my personality, I can find something entertaining in anything. Definitely there are comics that test the limits of that. I think you could hear it in my voice, the slow erosion of my sanity and health with Iron Man 2020, where by the time I got to the end of the series, I'd had enough. But most of the time you can have fun in one way or another. And Final Crisis is one where I think I liked the first 3 issues. And then the 4th issue was a little odd. And then I think it went really haywire on me. And I feel that way about a lot of Marvel events, frankly, these days, where the first issue feels like pretty solid and the second issue is okay. And then it like the middle act is like, what the fuck are you doing now? Sorry, I don't know. Very, very strange. Anyway.
Maybe it was because your pitch was so good. Maybe that's it. Like the whole idea of Batman getting shot with a time bullet. I was just like, this sounds amazing.
I
like
did
in an absurd way. Like just
it is absurd. I did purchase out of booze. I did the retrospective on the Death of Captain America, which also is Civil War with Joe Claro, and it's a great one. But one of the funny things, and I think I'm going to get a lot of downvotes and hates for that video, is that I have really fond memories of the Brubaker run. I really thought it was good and everything else. So when I picked up the comics and I actually reread them, I was surprised at how many super irritating things was in that run. And we talk about that, and I think there's a lot of people who have very fond memories of that run that I think are going to be super pissed off. Hopefully they have a sense of humor about it.
Well, I definitely understand what you were saying in that video now. Like for me, like I find entertainment out of serious things. So I don't need things to be zany and wacky to like have fun with them. But I also can have very much fun with reading America Chavez. Like the Gabby Rivera book is really an underrated gem once you realize how to read it correctly. when you go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to get a really good character, drama of this character, and instead of just going, no, treat it like an absurd thing that it is. It just, I don't know. I have fun. I do actually. I like we were talking about the Superman books earlier, where Superman's a dick. Like, that's fun.
It is.
Now, I think in the 60s, I probably wouldn't have had fun in the same way because I would have looked at it from a completely different lens. But some of these books, Final Crisis, like your pitch probably saved me reading Final Crisis and being like, what the hell is this nonsense? And being all upset and like slamming the book closed. Now your pitch has made me go, oh, I need to make a drink and sit back and read this and laugh. Like it just sounds like it'll be a wild ride.
I think you get a drink. So the perfect way to do Final Crisis, I think, is to get yourself some dinner and a drink, read a couple issues, have dinner, then sit down with a drink for the second half, and it will be a fun ride. That's it. And I'd love to do more videos than that. I probably will. I know. I admit. So the secret is out. I do like to troll people from time to time in a nice way. I mean, there's a reason why I did Trouble, and there's a reason why I'm doing DC Universe decisions right now. It is funny to bring these comics up and kind of poke at them a little bit, and we'll see. But for that Brubaker run, I'll just say this before the video comes out: if you have that omnibus or you have those original issues, go in there and then like keep note just in the first few issues of how often the heroes are staring out of a window, kind of speculating into the reflection. And you take a shot every time there's a panel with like the Red Skull drinking a glass of wine, looking at his reflection out the window. You will be plastered by. There's an amazing amount of those shots. So anyway,
which one are you talking about again?
The Brubaker run. So when he came out
of Cap America,
when he led up to the death, and then kind of the 20 or so issues that followed that. So
okay, I've read part of his run with Winter Soldier.
Yeah, that's the Return of the Winter Soldier and all that. But just if you have that omnibus or those issues, like tonight, grab that first issue of his run and just count up the times people are looking out the window. It is amazing how much there is of that. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Just that it's the little things. Okay, so last question here. Where we go? I should do the drunk reading of some of these events, though. That's a good idea. I need more content. Clearly, I'm not putting out enough videos. Here you go. Here's a good question. So 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
What do you think? What's going to happen in the next 20 years? What are the big things that are going to happen? As wild and crazy, we've had some drinks, so nobody's going to hold us to any of this. What do you think?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Comics are in such a weird place right now that there doesn't seem to be any trajectory. 20 years from now, I don't know. Where they're at now, I could have never predicted 20 years ago. So I'm thinking where they go from here. Oh man. I predict lots and lots of spin-off characters. I predict that both Marvel and DC will just keep milking. We'll have multiple Captain Marvels. We'll have multiple Captain Americas, Spider-Mans, Superman, DC, like Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And I predict that a lot of that will be used for the purposes of these other mediums that we talked about earlier, like movies and books and things, and that we won't have things like the MCU. We'll have just different, like, is the classic Batman not your cup of tea? Don't you worry, we've got this other like they'll be like trying to make these characters a variation of them to appeal to every demographic. That's what I see.
Do you kind of get the sense, because I was thinking this with the Nubia is not a new character, but she'll have a backup story in the Immortal Wonder Woman, and we have the South American Wonder Woman coming up. It's starting to feel to me like we're getting kind of the Green Lantern core of all the characters. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you
Damn it.
Superman and John Kent Superman and Connor Superman. I'm sure we can throw a couple more in there. We have Supergirl. There's room for 3 or 4 more. We're getting basically with DC, like every hero will have the Green Lantern core level of like 5 or 6 versions of each one all at the same time. And what does that universe look like?
Yeah, I was thinking of it more like on the family level. Like, how we have like the Batman family. I was thinking we're gonna have like the Superman family and the, but Green Lantern Corps is a great analogy. Like it's true. I fully see it, and I think Marvel will be embracing that. I fully see a Captain America family. Why there's not a female. I mean, I know that there's been females who have taken the mantle of Captain America a couple times, but why there's not an actual female Captain America right now blows my mind. Not that I want it. I don't, as me as a fan, I don't want that, but it's shocking to me that we don't have quote unquote, Lady Liberty or whatever name that they would come up with to run around and basically be the female version of Captain America. And then of course we need a black Captain America. We need like an old Captain America, young Captain America, the sidekick version of Captain America. Like every demographic needs to be covered so that we can plaster it. So we can have in the books, we can have like, the YA novels about Kid Captain America. We can have the movies about, whatever version they find is, just everything that there was plaster and just tailor, customize, like pick out the one that fits the demographic and hit them with it.
The Marvel doesn't seem to do this nearly as much as like DC seems to be heading in this direction. Marvel tends to only want to do one at a time, a little bit.
Yes, that's been the case for sure. Marvel's, and part of the reason maybe that I've always liked Marvel more than DC is a little bit to this is like because I don't like legacy characters. So for me, I'm just like, pick the Captain America, who's the best Captain America. That's it. The rest of them, they can all go get catapulted in the sun. I say that in jest, like,
but I like what confused me a little bit. Like, I don't know. I mean, it always feels like they pick the worst possible option. So with Captain America, you have the Falcon getting built up as a substantial character,
right?
Good runs and bad runs of the Falcon. Nobody seems to be able to kind of consistently get that going. But let's say you have a decent Falcon character there. You have the Falcon take the legacy of Captain America and become Captain America. You retire the old Captain America. And then, like, in a very short time span, within a year and a half, it's like, oh, crap, we got to get Steve back in the Captain America costume. And it's like, I'd rather them commit to the bit, like go 5 years, just do it. How long was Rhodey Iron Man? It was more than a year.
Yeah, I don't think it was much more than a year, but
maybe I'm misremembering.
It's been a long time. It was like a long time ago. So what I remember may not actually be reality.
I just think you can, I think you can pick one of two roads. Either you say, all right, we're going to really have the Falcon be an amazing character, have a new piece of IP out there, and we're going to make the Falcon amazing. He's going to be showing up in the Captain America movie, and we're going to go all in on that. Or you say, you know what, it is time. Let's try him as Captain America. We're going to do that. But then commit to that. Like say, okay, I don't care what happens. We're keeping Steve on the shelf for 5 years. Just go one direction or other. But when you do kind of half of each, it just sucks for everyone. I mean,
I agree, but with mainstream comics becoming more and more corporate, and by that I'm referring to having corporate overlords like either look at Disney or AT&T. I believe in the world of these corporations, it's cake. They want to have their cake and eat it too. And I don't think they like the idea that, okay, we're going to retire Captain America and replace him, say Falcon as an example. Well, there's going to be some people that like that, right? Obviously, you wouldn't do it if you didn't think someone's going to like it. But there's going to be a lot of people who are like, I'm not interested. I want Steve Rogers. So you're dividing your fan base.
Not Mark Cap. Yeah.
And now old school publisher old, like, say, Jim Shooter comics company, they would be like, we'll stick to our guns. We believe in this. We're going to lose some fans. We're going to gain some new fans. We're going to do this. But it was small enough that they could make those decisions. I think Disney overlords look at that and say, well, why are we sacrificing that audience when we can have both? And so why not not create a universe, but create a situation in comics where the fans are trained to understand that you can have your cake and eat it too. Like, Marvel's already tested this. Like, they're a perfect test bed. They did this with Wolverine. At one particular point, there were 7 different Wolverines running around the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
7. Like, and there was the female version, there was the young female, there was the old Wolverine, there was the cartoon comical whatever Wolverine Might, or what Wolvie was called. You had the teen angst Wolverine, you had the villain Wolverine, and then you had it was every single like spectrum. It was like, and what you do is, once you establish that it sort of you may not have 7 Wolverine comics out, you may only have 1 Wolverine comic, but now you can do a mini series featuring, hey, we're going to do a mini series featuring Wolvie.
Yeah.
Well, fans just sort of accept it because they know that thing's around. He may not have his own ongoing book, but it's like, hey, it's a Wolvie 6-issue series. Hey, we're going to do a Wolvie movie. And that's, I think, the target. I think that's like, once you get all these IPs out there, they can just sort of be floating, mothballed occasionally, pulled out whenever they need it. And as fan bases sort of move around and you start to get like, oh, there's a lot of attention for Honey Badger. Great. Make a Honey Badger video game. But when you pick and choose one particular, like, this is Wolverine, it's harder to do that. I think they want a world where they can just pick and choose, like making pizza. Oh, you like pineapple on your pizza? Great. You don't? Okay, here's pepperoni for you. Oh, you just want cheese? We want to appeal to everybody. And we're going to have every superhero is going to have a different slice that's going to appeal to whatever you like. That's my prediction for 20 years. I hope it's wild enough.
How about this? So this is what I think. So I'll go more crazy. I do think I think Marvel and DC have a lot of threats right now. I do think Scholastic is making huge inroads. I think that this new audience that actually is important and should be captured is being captured by other people. I think Scholastic's capturing a bunch of it. I think that some of the manga publishers are capturing it. I think Penguin's making some moves. I think you've got a lot of people that are going to tackle that audience. And if you play this out 20 years, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, these IPs, these brands are not going to go away. They're still going to be quite powerful. But I think the people driving the comics industry are going to be not Marvel and DC. I think there's a really real world where that happens. And I don't say it as doom and gloom and disaster for those companies or the comic industry. Because I think that, frankly, a likely thing that will happen is that more money is going to flow into the comics industry. It's just going to flow to other places. I think the indies are going to get stronger. I think that these other kind of powers will get stronger. And I think Marvel and DC will ultimately maybe even get pushed to a wall where they license out their brands for somebody else to do something with, who want to play in this business and are treating it more like a business. There is a world where Scholastic gets the license to one of these two companies and starts dealing their comics. And that world so that's my crazy prediction of what could happen.
No, honestly, you're making a lot of sense to me, especially based on this prediction that I just sort of popped out of nowhere. Like, I can honestly see 20 years from now, the idea of DC and Marvel licensing out making even more sense in this wacky future that I thought of, where it's like, hey, we're not really interested in doing continuity anymore. We just want these IPs to be mineable. We're just creating like little mining nodes that we can chip away at and pull money. And that's why we want 18 Spider-Man, 12 Wolverines, half a dozen Captain America, whatever. Like, and then the little publishers come out, like, IDW, well, they won't be around, Say, someone at Dark Horse goes, hey, we want to do, the Wolvie miniseries. Like they just pick and choose who they want to license, and they just boop, 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 hand them out. And because we've now spent 20 years getting people to accustom that continuity is not a thing anymore. That's just, all those people that used to like that and be part of it, they're extinct. Like this whole new crowd of people, and to them, they're just buying bite-sized chunks of entertainment that don't have to be connected. So if Boom is licensing Captain America at the same time that Dark Horse is licensing Spider-Man, it doesn't matter. They're not crossing over anyway. And in fact, who knows what even version of Spider-Man that they're going to get. And we're seeing that right now. Look, I mean, arguably the greatest, most popular, famous Spider-Man game of all time sells PS4s is the Spider-Man game. It's a fantastic game. The sequel is Miles Morales. Like, we're not gonna, and like, oh, okay, we're doing okay. Well, I get it. Miles Morales is a thing. It's been around for a while, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's what I think that they want to do, is be like, why sell one Spider-Man when we can sell 12?
And if they can pull it off, it's a good business decision. It absolutely is smart for them to do. But it is, I do think that I think comics definitely continue. I think people who talk about the entire industry imploding are missing kind of these other movement taking place, or they're just looking at one side of it. I think that we've seen big players come and go in the past. Marvel and DC have been incumbents for quite a long time, but right now, people who are not Marvel or DC are spending a lot of money building out this channel. And that, it could also fail. But right now, it feels like those people, and it is one of those cases, a lot of people look at Scholastic and they think kiddie books and that kind of stuff, YA. But Scholastic is a much more complicated animal, and they definitely have massive targets they want to hit, and they're going to be something to contend with. So we will see. But anyway, we should wrap this up. Ash, any last comments to say in the chat? We've had a great conversation tonight.
No, I thank you for having me on the show. I'm always a listener of your stuff. I enjoy what you always have to say. We don't always agree, but I think that's what I really enjoy talking with you about, because two people just nodding their heads all the time saying, yep, 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 you're echoing everything. Like, that's boring. So I always want to talk to you precisely because your ideas don't always mesh with me, but you're always well-spoken, and you always have great viewpoints. You have a lot of experience in things that I don't have in, so you enlighten me on many things.
You're being kind right now.
No, I'm not. Honestly, you are too down on yourself. Always eating, being humble, which I appreciate. I'd rather have that than be the arrogant asshole. But you deserve to have people, pump you up a little bit. So I enjoyed being on. I enjoyed the chats. Everyone that's in the chat, thank you for listening to 50% being me. Like you came here for Perch and you got Ash too, but
no, they come here. Honestly, the people I wind up talking with are always bringing a massively great perspective, and you did not disappoint. So thank you very much. Love talking with you too. And I like it when there's disagreement. I really, it's funny. I listen to other streams from time to time, and it's kind of everybody's on the same page. And I always think, I start wanting to argue with stuff, even stuff I agree with, just because
right.
Like, I can't do this anymore. We gotta debate. But anyway, go check out Jorge's book. I will at some point, I'll be freed up that I can add it to the description when Streamlabs and YouTube all processes it. So I'll do that. It's on Comixology right now. And Ash, thank you very much. Hope you'll join me again real soon.
Anytime you want, let me know if I'm free. But
of course. And we'll have more to drink, which is good. So.
Yeah, drink. Yeah, this is great. Sit around and drink and talk comics. This is phenomenal. I love it.
How it should be. All right, good everybody, and have a great Halloween. And I'll see you for the election. Yeah.
All right. Good night, everyone. Be safe and have a happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.